Look good. Who's David?
Trim status good. Unknown bit rate. The health is good. I'm not showing anything on the screen. Hey, if we're live, one of y'all say something. I
You're
can't.
not seeing any comments?
I'm seeing.
Or you're not seeing the live. Okay.
Yeah, the public view. Wait a minute. Hey, my sky's 5D. Oh, the prepared mother.
Yay.
I haven't seen my sky's 5D in a while.
Yeah, I think since the last live stream.
How was it that long ago? How's it going, my 5? You know what? I haven't checked your channel in a while, my sky. I need to go see what you've been doing lately. All right, guys, we're just starting up a little bit early to make sure we've got all the technical stuff worked out. My last videos are mind-blowing. All right, as soon as we get some more people in here, my sky, remind us to give you a shout out. Hey, it's North Country Off Grid. How you guys doing? I've been catching up on y'all's videos here lately. You guys got it going on up there. We are going to get started with the content here in just a minute. We went live to make sure we've got the technical sides down. We always have technical problems. We are not technical people. Yeah, if you guys haven't seen North Country Off Grid's channel yet, he's about as big as we are, so I don't know why I'm giving him a plug. He should be giving me a plug. But he's got a neat channel. They've definitely got their stuff wired together up there. They are far, far ahead of us on their off-grid journey. All right, Burden. They reprogrammed it again and added a couple more programs, but so far it's not doing too good. Not as bad as Mark Dice's today. Hey, Paul Hibbard. How you doing, sir? Well, I'm sorry to hear that, David. I was hoping you would be back on the hog and chasing down what was it you said? Adventurous young women. I can't remember what your phrase was that one time, but all right, it is 9 o'clock.
That's distracting.
Yeah, what's going on? It's not showing us all the stuff it normally does.
What are you...
Farrah Pierce, how you doing, sir? Everybody needs to like. Yes. I wonder if we could watch this in the other...
What are you wanting to see?
I kind of want to see... We are not receiving video data at a fast enough rate. Your viewers may experience buffering. Ensure your connection is fast enough or consider using a lower bit rate. Now you see, this is why we tried to do this earlier. And it... Anyway. Alright, we're not going to worry about it, man. I'm sorry. We're gonna jump right into it. I think we've got 18 people on the... in with us today. Tommy Shaw, hello. Dry Fire Faith, good to see you, sir. Dry Fire also has a channel y'all should check out. Thank you, Tommy. Okay, so we're going to jump right into it. What did Burden say to... So, white Christians observe a Jewish text. Well, that is jumping right into it. Jolly Crocodile. First off, I'm not sure what being white would have to do with it, sir. But obviously we observe a Jewish text. That's called the Bible. The whole stinking thing was written by Jews from start to finish. Actually, that's not true. The whole thing was written by Israelites. The Jews are one small subset of Israelites. But I am not aware of one single word in this book that wasn't written down by an Israelite or a Jew, except possibly the book of Job is considered to maybe have a very, very old origin and maybe even predate the Israelites or the Hebrews or whatever you want to call them. Also, I have a little personal pet theory that says the Song of Solomon was largely written by the Queen of Sheba. I've never heard anyone else make the claim before, but I'm pretty enamored with the idea. So, Crocodile, yes, every white Christian who's ever been observed a Jewish text. It's the Bible. Alrighty. Hey, Kevin. Hey, Alexis T is with us. How you doing, man? All right, we're gonna. Okay, please clarify. Is the Torah a sacred text to you? All right, so let's just jump right in. What is Torah observance, Jolly? I'm going to be talking to you since you're asking the hard questions right now. So you're going to give me someone to focus in on for a little while. Moderators, we let ideas go, but we don't let insults and stupid anger go. So any idea is allowable, but if anyone gets argumentative and just vulgar and angry, then they're out. Okay, so is the Torah a sacred text? And the simple answer is yes. Of course, the Torah is a sacred text to Christians. The book of Genesis is in the Torah. The Torah is okay. I may not get this exactly right. The Pentateuch is what the Christians we call the first 5 books of the Bible. My understanding is Jews and Hebrews and Israelites call the first 5 books the Torah. That includes Genesis. The 10 Commandments is found in there. The story of Noah and Abraham and all that stuff they teach you in Sunday school, all that's in those first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah. Yes, they are a sacred text to us. And they started trying to rebuild some sort of culture and faith after they were all thrown out of Jerusalem for the last time, and I believe like AD 40. And that was the ultimate diaspora and the destruction of Jerusalem, and there was no stone left, one upon the other. And the Romans came in and just leveled the place, and the Jews weren't even allowed to live in Jerusalem. So they started trying to recreate some kind of framework to sort of hang their belief system on now that the temple was destroyed and they didn't have access to any of the things they felt like they needed. And that developed into the Talmud. We do not observe the Talmud at all. That's the difference between Torah observance and, say, Messianic Christians or Messianic Jews. I'm sorry, all Christians are Messianic. Messianic Jews. The Messianics will observe a lot of those Jewish traditions, and there's nothing wrong with those Jewish traditions. They just are traditions, and our big thing, or my big thing, is that we're trying to strip our faith out of all traditions and get it back down to the barest essentials. So I'm not going to throw away my father's traditions to take on someone else's father's traditions. If it's not in the Bible, we're not dealing with it right now. Some of those things that you might think about in the Talmud that aren't in the Bible, Hanukkah, Purim, what else? Menorahs, some of those more well-known symbols of Jewish worship. That Talmudic stuff, no, we stay separate from that because it's not in the Bible. So if that's what you're talking about, are Jews a chosen people still? Jolly, did we miss anything from old Jolly?
I thought we weren't going to follow the comments this time.
Oh, well, Jolly's asking good questions. Okay, Jolly, are the Jews a chosen people still? Yes. Sort of. Kind of. God's words are forever. If God says something, it's done, and it never goes away. Remember, God speaking is what brought the whole world into existence. I mean, God said, let there be light, and boom, So when God says something, Jesus describes himself as the Word. So God's words are powerful, and they are everlasting, and they do not go away. So the Jews are still a special people. They are a set-apart people. They are a people who are God's problem. And let's put it that way. Obviously, Messianic Jews, Jews who've accepted Christ, in my opinion, are brothers in Christ, and they've experienced salvation. Obviously, non-Messianic Jews have not, and they are in the same boat as anyone who hasn't accepted Christ. But God still has a special place for them. They're fulfilling a promise he made to David, that he would always have an heir, able to be king in Jerusalem. Not that the heir always would be, but he would have an heir always able to be king. And also for his own sake, because he did draw these people out and set them up. And if he let them be utterly destroyed, it would reflect back on him and his inability to hold his people. So yes, I do believe this. I'm going to get myself in some trouble already before I got going. The Jews of today are the descendants of the tribe of Judah, and they do have a special place in God's heart or plan. Okay. Jolly's never heard a Christian say the Torah is a sacred text before, so I'm confused. I got to be honest with you, Jolly, I'm confused too because I mean, I grew up in the mainstream church, and I always taught me Psalms, and they always taught me Proverbs, and they taught me the Old Testament as being the inspired Word of God. So I don't know how. I mean, every Christian I've ever known thought the Old Testament was a sacred text. Uh, like I said, the Ten Commandments. That's a sacred text. I don't. I'm wondering, are you grinding a little bit of an axe here, or are you trying to set me up for an argument? Uh, the Old Testament is inspired scripture. That is been handed down from the very beginning. I don't know of any mainstream legitimate Christian who says otherwise. I mean, just think about all the Old Testament that prophesies Christ's coming. And all the books of Daniel and Zechariah that prophesy about the end times still to come, and some of the times that did come already. Clearly, all sacred text. Jeremiah, Lamentations, Isaiah, some of these heavy books, these calls to repentance and all this stuff. Yeah, easily, very easily sacred text. Uh, in fact, I would say that I'm. Oh yeah, whoever held that one comment for review, yeah. Oh, where was I? All right, so let me talk about what it is for us. What is it? I pretty much just said it. For us, Torah observance. There's a difference between Torah observance and Messianic Christianity or Messianic Judaism. Geez, I did it again. And then all of the Israelisms, maybe. There's the Hebrew Israelites, the British Israelites. I'm sure there's more, but those are the two big ones everyone knows about. The Torah observant people, and these are my definitions. The thing about these Hebrew roots, Torah observant, Messianic types is it's herding cats. You can't get anyone to agree on anything. So everything I say, you talk to 10 other people and they'll give you 11 other opinions. This is my opinion. Torah observant people say that the Old Testament is still in effect unless it's been specifically fulfilled in the New Testament. There is no consensus about what that means for something to be fulfilled. I've got my own opinions. Everyone has their own opinions. I'll talk about mine a little bit later. The Messianics from the outside looking in, are people who might say they hold that same view, but also adopt a lot of Jewish customs and a lot of Jewish traditions. Nothing wrong with it. It's just not us. And then the Israelites, the Israelisms, they usually say that, and if you are one of these Israelites of one of the various varieties, feel free to speak up and correct me for what I get wrong here. Generally, the Israelites say that they're one of the lost tribes, and literally descendants of the lost tribes, and they're real, literal Israel. Some of the Israelisms reject the modern Jews as not being descendants of Judah. The Hebrew Israelites tend to take that view. The purest, I'm not going to get into the Israelisms, except to say that you take the two extremes most people know about, the British Israelites and the Hebrew Israelites, and they're literally black and white versions of each other. There's very little difference between them as far as I can tell. There are no other descendants of Israel except them, and they have some proof texts they go to and some historical things they look at, and neither side is convincing to me. I will say this: I believe the tribes will be found. I think it's in the Book of Revelation, but as I read it, it says they'll be found from all corners of the globe, every tongue and tribe and nation. I don't remember what all it says. I might be confusing two things, but they were scattered everywhere. They won't just come from one place. The ones that we most likely know right now, though, are from Africa, and they are black. So do with that as you will. There's been a tribe that is most likely the descendants of Aaron, and DNA evidence and some cultural evidence and some archaeological stuff seems to make it pretty clear case for these people being the descendants of Aaron. They're in South Africa, and they are very African. So do with that as you will. that is the evidence we have for us in front of us right now. Jolly, I understand some Torah observance now. Well, I hope so. There's a lot more to it though, Jolly, but hopefully we'll get into it. Bonnie Blue, yeah, what? I don't need to be reading all this. Hey, Dean. Dean's the reason why we're having this conversation. So, y'all.
Just let them know that you're gonna field questions.
We will field questions, or let you guys get your thing. I'm silent until I get distracted, and I'm trying not to just have this be me reading, the questions that you guys can read for yourselves. All right, so that's what it is. What is it not? What is Torah observance not? Well, Torah observance is not a path to salvation, first and foremost. There is only one path to salvation. That's Jesus. I want to stop and say I'm probably the guy least qualified to be talking about this right now, but we're talking about it. So let me just give the disclaimer. I'm attempting to live my life this way. I have not succeeded by any stretch of the imagination. But salvation is only through Jesus. And salvation is to everybody, is open to everybody. I am not a Calvinist. I don't believe in predestination. I think that's you might. And if you do, you might not completely understand how it looks to me from the outside. But I have major problems with predestination. But salvation is only through Christ. And it has absolutely nothing to do with any action you do, one way or the other. Observing Torah, not observing Torah, the words of Jesus, anything. Salvation is predicated on one thing. What must we do to be saved? And that is believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and that's it. There is nothing else. If you do that and you stop right there, you're fine. You're good. So Torah observance is not a path to salvation, and it is not salvation through works. There is no way to get salvation through works. You cannot work your way into heaven. That is not what Torah observance is. It is not a rejection of the gospel. It can sometimes lead to that, and sort of the danger signals I look for in someone who I think is going off the rails this way. Because if the enemy of your soul can't get you one way, he'll get you the other way. If you're trying to do right, he'll use your momentum to push you too far off the other way. You got a left and right lateral limit here, and he doesn't care which one he gets you outside of. So the way that I kind of look to see if people are going off the rails is when they start rejecting the new portions of the New Testament, specifically Paul. It's almost always Paul. People start rejecting Paul, minimizing Paul. Torah observant folks get real balled up about Paul because he says some really hard things, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, and I'll try to resolve it for you the way I resolved it for myself, because I had to fight with it too. I'll leave you with this, but on that, I'll leave you with this on that before. Anytime you talk, you have to start in 2 Peter. You have to start in 2 Peter, and it's 3. I wrote it down. It's 2 Peter 3:15, and essentially it's Peter talking about his beloved brother Paul, which is important because, and we'll talk about this later too. Peter was Torah observant, and that is unquestionable. That is in the New Testament text. Peter, and he talks about his beloved brother Paul, and he says that he writes about many things that are hard to understand, and you can actually lose your salvation in Paul. That's in Peter. So before you rob Peter, you got to pay Paul, or something. Before you pay Paul, you got to rob. Anyway, before you read Paul, go to Peter and start there and say, okay, Paul is referenced in Peter by Peter as a beloved brother. His writings are endorsed, and we have a stern warning about them. Lots of Torah observant folks and Hebrew roots and Messianics, we get real jittery around Paul because he talks about I'm getting photobombed back there by Justin Bieber, but if you read them and you read them careful, you'll start to what the explanation I came up with. We'll talk about in a little while, but you got to be careful in Paul. All right, so what else is it not? It is not bondage. It is not legalism. Okay, let's talk about legalism here, people. I get this all the time. My parents are wonderful Christian people. My father is copiously educated. He's got a master's degree in biblical languages, and he reads the Bible backwards and forwards, and he knows his stuff inside and out. And even who's an independent thinker, and he is not a I don't want to say he's rebellious, but he almost rebellious. You know, I mean, authority has to, even he has told me that, oh, this is legalism. Why are you going into legalism? That's what the Pharisees did. The Pharisees were legalist, and Jesus rejected them. And I say no. The Pharisees were not guilty of legalism. The Pharisees were guilty of lawlessness. They were the opposite of legalism. And I wrote it down, and I didn't keep good notes. I'm sorry. I was trying to do this all at once, but I believe it's Mark. It's Mark 7:13. Mark 7:13 talks about, and there's a parallel passage in Matthew that I actually like a little better, but Mark was the one I could find again here real quick. And Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, and they're wanting to know, why do your disciples eat with unwashed hands? And they're talking about, you know, in the traditions of our fathers. And Christ lays into them, and he says, yeah, I know, of course you want to observe the traditions of your fathers, so you cannot observe God's commands. You have made void the word of God with the traditions of men, or anyway, you've substituted the traditions of men in for the teachings of God or the commands of God. The Pharisees were not legalists. They were lawless. They were whatever lawbreakers are. So this whole idea of legalism, it's nowhere in Scripture. It doesn't fit any description of anything the Pharisees were ever accused of. It's not in there. And it drives me nuts when I get accused of legalism. First off, what is that? You know, it's like collusion. What is collusion? It doesn't exist. It's not a thing. All right, so it's not bondage. It's not a path to salvation. It's not a rejection of the gospel. It is not Jewish worship. We covered that a little bit with the Talmud. All right, that's what it is. Okay, why do we do it? Ooh, I might want to change up my, well, where are we at? Do we got any good,
You want to see where their question's at?
Yeah.
Dry Fire Faith has a question about Peter's vision.
Okay, Peter's vision. I actually didn't want to go there just yet, Dry
Okay.
Fire. We will get there, because that's all tied up in the dietary laws and clean, unclean. And this is where I'm going to lose a lot of my Torah observant brethren, and they're going to unsubscribe and excommunicate me. But we're going to go there. But hang on to that one, Dry Fire. What else did we miss?
I don't know. There's just been a lot of back and forth, and I think everything's been...
Billy Joe, Jim Bobby, you're not under law but under grace. Yes, actually we're going to deal with Romans 2, Billy Joe, because that falls under what Peter was talking about with Paul. If you want to talk about Romans and the law, you have to read the entire book of Romans pretty much at one sitting, or in one. You can't take strobe light verses out of there, because it talks about the law of sin and death, and then the law of grace and redemption and whatnot, and it talks about all these different kind of laws and contrasts them to God's law. Romans is actually considered a book written to... Oh, I'm going to get this wrong. Dadgummit, I'm so sorry, man. Don't quote me on this, but I'm pulling this from memory. Romans is considered to be a book written to Gentiles, not protecting, but defending the Jewish believers. And we'll touch on this again too in a little while. Romans is very complex, and you cannot use Romans to do away with the law, God's law, Torah, because if you do, you know, Romans talks about the law of sin and death. Well, I'm sorry, no words God ever uttered were sin and death. All right, the 10 Commandments would be laws of sin and death. You know, thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not kill would be a law of death. Well, that's the exact opposite of a law of death. It's actually a law against death. So that doesn't work. You gotta find something else to be the law of sin and death than God's words, and certainly the Old Testament. And I'm not entirely sure that's what you were saying, Billy Joe. I just
Yeah, he's got a Galatians.
yeah, we got a Galatians 3, and actually Galatians 3. We're going to end up in Galatians 3, Billy Joe, for another reason. Galatians 3 is sort of the chapter that sort of ties a neat little bow around all this. And again, you got to look at the whole chapter. Actually, you almost have to look at the whole book. Hey, Wes, how you doing, brother? But Galatians 3 is kind of a text I would go to say, yeah, no, this is a thing, and it's a good thing. All right. It also talks about Paul being a carnal Christian. Yes, it does, Dry Fire, and that is something else we will get to. Thou shalt not murder, vulgar despair. Yeah, Kevin's saying Romans. I'm getting sucked into the comments again. Kevin and I have met in person. He's a close friend, and we've got to talk about a lot of this stuff, and he believed it before we ever came in contact with each other, so he's probably going to say stuff that reflects pretty closely what I believe. So let's talk about this thing. Is it a requirement? We've got this thing I claim, and I won't back up all my claims just yet. We will here in a little while. But is it something I believe you have to do? We've established that it's not for salvation, but then do you have to do it? And the answer to that, and here's where I'm going to lose my Torah observant brethren, is an uncategorical no. We cannot read the New Testament honestly and say that you must be Torah observant. It seems clear to me, and I'm about to show you the verses now. In fact, where is it at? Oh, I didn't take good notes. Boom. There is a two-track system here, man. And so we got Romans 14, start 2 Peter. Can you get me Galatians 2, 7, and 8? It might be Galatians 2, 7, and 8. Or it might be Acts 15. Oh, you know what? It's Acts 15:1. It's Acts 15:1. All right, Mariah's going to get us Acts 15:1. There's a two-track system here, and we're about to show you this. It is not a requirement. And please bear with good notes. Which version are we reading here?
King James.
All right, we're in the King James.
Is this 15:11? Is that what you have?
Well, it runs through 11.
Oh, okay.
So let me set up the story here real quick. Paul's out preaching to the Gentiles. Some Torah observant Christians show up and start preaching to I can't remember where he's at, but start preaching to these new converts, telling them they have to be circumcised. You must be circumcised and follow the law. And I'll just read you that verse. It's Acts 15:1. And certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren and said, except ye be circumcised after the manner of Moses, ye cannot be saved. I love the way the King James sounds. I love the way it reads. It's beautiful. It's not the only version you can read. It's not the authorized version. It's the one we happen to have on hand. But what it's saying is these men came down and said you have to be circumcised and you have to follow the law of Moses. Paul goes ballistic, runs down to Jerusalem and gets in everyone's face and says, what's going on here? All right. Where is it at? But I don't have a different version in front of me. So what it ends up happening is Peter gets up and he starts talking about, hey man, God's called me to preach to the circumcised. God's called Paul to preach to the uncircumcised. And they acknowledge here that there's a two-track system. You can go one of two ways. You can go Torah observant, and you can follow the law that hasn't been fulfilled, or you can go I call it the Hellenistic route because Gentile has such negative connotations to it. Or you can go the Hellenistic route, and if you go the Hellenistic route, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It is completely allowable in the text. They even set up the standard for them. I think it's, remember the poor abstain from fornication, which now you're still not free from the law, by the way, because fornication is just a reference to the Old Testament sexual laws. Fornication is not, in our culture, we think fornication means sex before marriage. It does not. It means prohibited sexual acts. And the only place where there's a comprehensive list of prohibited sexual acts in the Bible is in the Torah. So when they say, abstain from fornication, they're saying follow the Old Testament sexual laws. And I think there was something else. I don't remember what it was, but they set up the Hellenistic route, and you can go that route and you're good. But But Peter was Torah observant, and Peter was called to preach to the Jews and the Torah observant. And in that case, if you sign on to that other system, it's not a higher calling. And Romans 14 will show you that. You read Romans 14 with your blinders off, and you see it. There's a two-track system going on here for the most part, except for that fornication. And we could start arguing about Sabbath, but we'll hold off on that for a minute. If you go with that Hellenistic route, that's perfectly okay. There's nothing wrong with that. If you choose to go Torah observant, though, you're taking on certain obligations and responsibilities, and even maybe a whole different direction. Doesn't change the basics. You're still a sinner. Your works can't save you. Obeying those laws will not save you. Disobeying those laws won't damn you. Both routes. But this is where, and when you realize this, Paul's writings start making a ton of sense. It all starts making a ton of sense when you realize this. You know, Jesus himself was Torah observant. Christ was Torah observant, and never preached against observing God's laws. He preached against replacing God's laws with your own teachings, and that's what the modern church is very, 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 very guilty of. This is why the modern church and Christianity is dying. God has taken his hand off of it. He has almost rejected it because we've taken our teachings, our traditions, and we've substituted them in for his laws. And the crazy thing is, people, we can have our teachings and we can have our traditions. Nothing wrong with it. God's fine with the window dressing. He doesn't care how you dress it up. But you can't ever take your words and say, this is what God says. I'm speaking for God. I'm substituting, and he will, boom, he won't have none of that. And that's what we've done in the West and in America and in the Protestant church, and yes, in the Catholic church, and even some in the Messianic movement. I'm going to be getting a little in y'all's faces, just a tiny little bit here. We cannot ever put our traditions and our words above God's traditions, our teachings. Our teachings help us live by God's words. I'll give you an example. Meth is not forbidden in the Bible anywhere. I cannot come to you. I could not walk to a man laying on the street, covered in his own filth, who's abandoned his wife, who's abandoned his family, who's doing all these terrible things, probably selling his body to other men to buy these drugs. And I can't look him in the eye and tell him, God has forbidden you to take methamphetamines, you terrible sinner, because God did not forbid him to take methamphetamines. Now, I can go to him and say, sir, I believe your use of methamphetamines causes you to disobey God in other areas, this area, that area, and that. But I cannot preach being is a sin because God didn't say it was a sin. And adding to or taking away from the word is a sin, is a deadly sin. If you substitute your words in for God's words, he will curse you. And that's what we've seen in the West and in the Western church. I am convinced of this. You can't be humble before God when you're saying, well, God, I'm going to fix your word for you because you got that one all wrong, sir. And I'm not sure where I was going with that, but I was going somewhere with it. So how do you be Torah observant? Well, it's not a requirement, but if you're going to do it, you've got to do it. You can't do it right. You can't be perfect at it. It's not possible to be perfect at it. That was the whole point. Not the whole point, but that was one of the points of the law, is to prove to us that we can't earn salvation. We can't be good enough to earn God's approval, no matter what we do. But you do have to do it with the right spirit, and faith and works and faith. And if you're on the Hellenistic side, your faith has to lead you to works. And if you're on the Torah side, your works have to lead you to faith. Right? Two sides of the same coin. It's starting to make a little bit of sense, doesn't it? Faith and works. Faith without works is dead. Works without faith is dead. Got this one side that maybe exemplifies works a little bit, and this other side that maybe exemplifies faith a little bit more. But if their faith doesn't cause them to live their lives in any different way than anyone else, then who cares? And we all know that works by themselves are nothing. It's a beautiful two-part coin thing here, two different sides of the same coin. It starts getting to be a lot of fun when you cut through some of the foolishness of my way's better than your way, and you accept that God established this two-track system. And I wish I'd labeled my verses a little bit better, but I didn't. I wonder if that Galatians 2:7-8 would you mind checking that one for me, Don? Maybe here. I'm using words to describe I don't normally use because we're in public and being inauthentic. I don't remember. Meth is not sober. Yeah, dry fire. You're right. I mean, you could find principles that meth use would. I'm not saying it's okay to use meth. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, I'm using an absurd example to illustrate a point. But so you could find things like, you know, your body is a temple. No, you're not. Your body is a temple. You know, or that sort of stuff. Be ye sober. So you could find these principles, but you're not going to find an imperative. That's what I'm trying to say. You know, there's imperatives are, you know, thou shalt not commit adultery. That's an imperative. You know, honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. I'm being a little. Anyway, meth isn't an imperative. You know, meth is a principle. And if I try to take my interpretation of principles and stamp them with God's authority, you know, let there be light, boom, you know, and I try to say my words have that same weight, you know, meth is a sin. I can't do that. We can't do that. Okay. I have a sneaky suspicion there's a lot, same thing, Warren. Yeah, sober body and mind. But you start having to define terms and conditions and compare it to other things, you know, and it's a principle. Obviously, God does not want us to take meth, but He did not command us not to take meth for a reason. I mean, God designed and made our bodies. He knows how difficult addictions are, and whatnot. And they represent a purely physical realm. Anyway, we won't go into all that. I love brain candy though, and I get into some brain candy stuff. Maybe it's the methamphetamines. I don't know. Maybe if I quit smoking the crack, I wouldn't be so crazy. All right, where were we? Okay, so how do you be Torah observant? You have to have the right attitude. The attitude here is you're doing things God's way. Sometimes people who call themselves Hebrew roots, that they're trying to go back to live their life in a way that God instituted. And I actually like the Hebrew roots idea, but it doesn't. It involves something different in my mind than Torah observance. When you talk about Hebrew roots, you're talking about the way the children of Israel lived when they first came into the land, when they had no king and every man did what was right in his own eyes. That was the society God set up first, a militia-based society. If you've watched our other videos, that I think is his best possible option for us on this earth. That, to me, that's what Hebrew roots is. Hebrew roots has nothing to do with Torah observance. Whole different conversation. One of the reasons I love Torah observance and Hebrew roots so much is it's so rawly masculine, and it does away with all this what we call New Testament wishy-washy soy boy stuff. You know, we take the Christ who said, if you don't have a sword, you know, sell your cloak and buy a sword, and we turn him into this you know, Birkenstock wearing hippie with a goatee instead of a beard. Christ had a beard. You seen the Shroud of Turin? Beard the whole way. All right. So, but how you do it? Well, let's talk about some of the things you'll see, and let's talk about sort of the big one first, and the one that Protestants will beat us Torah observant types over the head with probably first, and that would be circumcision. I say, they disagree with me, but I can back it up. I think in order to be Torah observant, if you want to take that tract, if you want to be circumcised, and I can point to a couple of different things to say so, and I know where we're going to go as soon as I say this. Someone may have already put it. I'm talking about circumcision in front of Biddy. It's just awkward now. Now it's just weird. They go to Paul and this whole piece, and well, circumcision is I can't. Dadgummit. I wrote down the reference and then I didn't label it. No, that's Sabbath. Anyway, so Paul goes off on, you know, circumcision is nothing. what we forget is that same passage, like in the same sentences, he says, neither is uncircumcision anything. This goes back to this idea of there's two tracks here. There's two systems. Yes, circumcision has nothing to do with salvation. It has nothing to do with any of that stuff. Neither does uncircumcision. So if you're not, if that verse is, if that passage is forbidding circumcision, it's also forbidding uncircumcision. So now what do you do? Well, you can't be circumcised. You can't be uncircumcised. You just whack the whole thing off. Now it really is awkward. That passage that I can't think of. I bet Kevin, I don't know why. Hey, Music Wells here. How you doing, sir? Kevin, I bet you could find that for me pretty quick, if I'm not mistaken. If you wouldn't mind seeing if you can. Hey, Jimmy's here too. So that is not an indictment of circumcision, because it would be, in that case, it would be an indictment of uncircumcision. That same argument gets into one of our other hobby horses here. We're big on head covering for women, and when people traverse away to us, they say, "Oh, it means your hair." Well, the same passage says men are supposed to have their head uncovered. So if a woman's covering is her hair, that means the men should all walk around. And of course, you look at wives have no covering on their head. And men have this big bushy hair and a ball cap on. Don't get me started. Hey, Frank's here. How you doing, Frank?
Yeah, he's being very persistent
What?
about what we think of paganism. I don't know if
What's your opinion on modernism? Okay, so I'm getting a little picture of you here, Jolly, and I think we're buffering. And what I'm getting here is I don't know how you would describe it yourself. Right? I hate the term white supremacist because it's not how you would describe yourself, and it's not really accurate. But it sounds like you might fall into that vein. Those Christian pagans. Timothy McVeigh fell into that group. He was a pre-Christian pagan. It was all involved in Elohim City and all that. If that's where you're coming from, obviously as a Christian, I believe that's the incorrect path, and ultimately that's not going to lead you to where you want to be. I don't want to be that hellfire and brimstone. You're gonna burn in hell, you pagan. But you're gonna burn in hell. No, I'm kidding. But unfortunately, that is what the Bible teaches. There's only one path to salvation, and unfortunately, paganism isn't it. And paganism isn't. You're not really a pagan. You're most likely some kind of atheist or agnostic, because you're not gonna base your life on supposed gods who couldn't read or write, who practiced human sacrifice and worshipped oak trees. Everything we know about those pre-Christian pagans is bad. There's not one good thing about them. Nothing you'd want to be involved in. They were dirty. They were ignorant. They were violent. They had very short, brutal lives. I know you're going to talk to me about that Roman historian who prayed of the German barbarian. That was a bunch of political propaganda. He was criticizing Rome and holding up the barbarians as having what he felt should be Roman virtues. He was not writing a history of the barbarians. He was writing a polemic about what Romans should be. Rome was all bad. At that point, yeah, Rome was all bad. Yeah, here we go. But the Romans were the Christians. This was pre-Christian Rome, okay? Remember, Rome didn't convert to Christianity to 3 something. And prior to that, they were oppressing the Christians. So unfortunately, I sort of reject all that again stuff. It just doesn't exist in what we know about the pagans. It certainly doesn't exist in what we know about the Anglo-Saxons when they invaded England. They were pre-Christian in those days. Records exist from that time, and they were an angry, brutal, violent, murderous, raping mob. That's where I come from. I'm Anglo-Saxon. That's who they were. And they were illiterate. So not people we want to be involved with, or not people we we can't like reject that. That is where we come from. That is who we would be without Christianity. There is nothing to suggest we would have evolved past that state. Evolution has never existed anywhere. Christianity brought us out of that state, and very rapidly, by the way, the Anglo-Saxons. And I'm just talking about the Anglo-Saxons because it's where I come from and it's people I'm interested in. When they converted to Christianity from paganism, they changed very, very quickly. And for a while, actually for a very long while, became a leading light in the world and sort of preserved literacy and learning and whatnot for a while there. Japanese are more advanced than many Christian countries.
There's some other good questions out there.
What do we got?
The Frank Petrie wants to know what denomination we are.
Hey, Frank. We don't really... All right, so before I'm ready to get into the Sabbath, before I touch on what denomination we are, Frank, we are not technically any denomination. We attend Extreme Church because I believe very strongly that we're commanded to forsake not the gathering together. That means you have to gather with other Christians. Right now, the only, I should say believers. Right now, the only believers we have to gather with is this mainstream. They're good people, mainstream Christians, but they're on that Hellenistic track. And maybe they're not where we'd like them to be even on that track, but they're good people. And so we attend that church, but we are not a part of that denomination. Fully Torah observant, it is my belief that there is no spiritual authority over a man except God. There is nothing between me and God but air, and maybe not even that. So I don't acknowledge anyone's authority. I don't acknowledge any hierarchy. If wiser, more knowledgeable brothers can come to me and call me out like they're commanded to in Scripture, then obviously if they're right and I'm humble, I should listen to them for that area. But we don't submit ourselves to a denomination. What else did we miss?
Oh, Craig was asking how should we observe the Sabbath?
Okay, well, since we're there, let's jump right into the Sabbath. All right, so the Sabbath. This is sort of the first place Torah observant types start, or Hebrew roots, Messianics. We have the Sabbath, because remember now, no Christian group rejects the Ten Commandments. None of them. Even the Catholic Church will say, even the Catholic Church, like they're worse than anybody else. They're not. They're no different than anybody else. Well, but even the Catholic Church, which sort of has removed itself as much as possible from the Hebrew roots of the faith, will tell you the Ten Commandments are something different. They can't explain why they're different. Some people will tell you, well, Jesus referenced them for the most part when he was talking to the rich young ruler, so that elevates. Yeah, but he didn't reference all 10 of them. But they'll all tell you the Ten Commandments are still in effect. Those, for some reason, that part of the law hasn't been fulfilled. Well, what's one of the Ten Commandments? And I should know which one, but I don't. Honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. And is it the third one, baby? Thank you. My beautiful daughter filled me in there. The third commandment is honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. Well, Sabbath means something very, 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 very specific. There is no doubt. And in fact, later on, he says, have you to do your work. And on the seventh day, you shall rest. The Sabbath is every seventh day. It's not, oh, here I go. I'm going to lose everybody. Okay, so how do we observe the Sabbath? Well, we take Scripture as our only authority, right? So what Scripture says to do on the Sabbath is what we do. So what does Scripture say to do on the Sabbath? It says to rest. It says not to kindle a fire. It says not to do any servile work. What else does it say about that? No commerce. You're not supposed to travel very far. So there's some things the Bible doesn't say to do on the Sabbath. It does not say to go to church on the Sabbath. We got to be real clear here, people. If we're going to be Torah observant, then we have to observe the Torah, and we can't get up on the Christians, the Hellenistic Christians, picking their own day versus God's day, and then come back and try to imprint our word on top of God's commands about the Sabbath. He does not command you to go to church on the Sabbath. There is no religious observance commanded for the weekly Sabbath. Excuse me. None that I can find. I'm willing to be schooled on this, but I haven't found any yet. In fact, I could make the argument that going to church on the Sabbath might not be all that restful. I'm not saying it's a sin to go to church on the Sabbath. I'm telling you, God is silent on this subject. So if you go to, and you know what? There's not a Torah observant person out there who would tell me it was sinful to go to a Wednesday night prayer meeting. Not one of you would say, oh my God, you went to a Wednesday night prayer meeting, you sinner. But I've had Torah observant people tell me, you still go to church on Sunday? How dare, you're not Torah observant. People, what did God tell us? He said, honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. We got to keep it whole. How do we keep it holy? Not by doing our things, by doing His things, by doing the things He told us to do on that day. This is something we struggle with even here a little bit. Sometimes that Sabbath, Saturday Shabbat gets very, very, very difficult. About 4 or 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, we don't have air conditioning in here, and it's 85, 90, 95 degrees sometimes, and everyone's sitting around the house, and there's no one to do things more than that day. The other 6 days of the week, all I want to do is sit there and vegetate, and suddenly on 4 or 5 o'clock on the Sabbath, I suddenly got to get the urge to go do something. That more than anything else tells me that I'm on the right track there. But so that's how we honor the Sabbath, the way God told us to honor the Sabbath. So this goes back to what Frank was asking me about the denomination, why I didn't want to talk about it. We do attend church on Sunday. That is not my preferred day. If I had my druthers, we would find an assembly that met Friday evening, probably right before Sabbath, or Sabbath was starting at sundown, and we would have a meal together, and the men that had a word would bring a word, and those that had a song would bring a song, and we would do it the way it was commanded to us to do. I don't have that option right now. Maybe I should start it. I don't know. I'm not 100% comfortable with going to the straight, home church, gather together. I think we need that accountability to keep us from going too far off the rails, getting a little too weird. So, how do we observe the Sabbath? The way the Bible says we do. We start at sundown on Friday. We don't start fires during the Sabbath. We heat, so we got to make sure we've got a fire started before sundown during the winter. And we got to make sure it burns all night long, so we've got it during the next day. We don't do commerce. We try not. My job occasionally requires me to work on Saturday. This is a confession here. This Sabbath, they were going to make me work, and they backed out at the last second. I don't know if you want to say I don't have the faith or the backbone to stand up to them and say no. I'm just being honest and open with you here. When work makes me go in on Sabbath, I do. I am not happy about that, but it's my problem, and I got to grow the backbone to deal with it. That's how we honor the Sabbath. It ties into why we go to church on Sunday still. Not my preference, but I think it's the right option right now. And they've got good children's programs and stuff. It is an eternal and self-evident truth, not an Abrahamic deceit written in a Jewish scroll. Sorry, I missed the first part of that, Jolly.
No, he's been going on and on and on.
Right now, hey, Musical, I see what you're saying. He's not getting insulting. He's not being vulgar. He's expressing his ideas. I'd like to engage him a little bit more, but I don't want to make the whole thing all about Jolly. I really, the thing I like about guys like Jolly is that they are half woke. They're looking at the system in place and they're saying this is broke. This is this. The problem they have is that they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and they're saying Christianity, as we observe it, as we've experienced it, is broke. Western culture, as we've known it, is broke. We got to kick it to the curb and go back to some, glorious pantheistic, prehistoric roots that just aren't there. And what I would love to do with guys like Jolly is get them focused into, okay, there was a time when this system really worked really, really well. Obviously, it has entropied over time, as any human endeavor will. Let's pull out the dead parts. Let's refix and get it back on track where it was. I'm sorry, Jolly, but you know, the prehistory pagans, they didn't accomplish anything. They didn't leave anything behind. They didn't improve anyone's lives. That system died for a reason. We got to go back to what worked. All right, there we go. I offered to speak with you in another. I don't know. That's probably not me. That's probably not me who they're talking about.
Have you gone through all your notes already?
No. Okay, so Sabbath. We dealt with the Sabbath. Oh, and by the way, I can show you the Sabbath in the New Testament. Hebrews 4:4. Now, if you read it in the King James, it's not as obvious. It is. It mentions the Sabbath, but then it sort of wanders off into rest. But read Hebrews 4:4. Actually, I think it goes through 4:9. It may be 4:9 where it gets really obvious. But that whole first part of Hebrews chapter 4 is talking about, you know, the Sabbath, and that there is still a Sabbath for God. The Sabbath is still in place. What else? So the feasts. Let's talk about the feasts real quick, and they're really easy to deal with. And the first one we're going to talk about is Passover, because it ties back into circumcision and why I believe that if you're going to be Torah observant, you need to be circumcised. And that is, you are not allowed to celebrate Passover unless you're circumcised. And it's in the very beginning when God institutes the Passover, he says, if there's, you know, uncircumcised among you that want to observe the Passover, they can't. If they want to do that, they have to be circumcised. If you can't observe, and the Passover is listed as a covenant for all time. It's an eternal. It doesn't say eternal. I believe it says a covenant for all time. So the Passover is definitely still in place. Remember, Christ celebrated the Passover, the Last Supper. Jesus having lunch with his buddies. You know, that's the Last Supper, and he instituted communion at that point. But there's nothing in there that leads me to believe he replaced the Passover with communion. Unless you want to say that communion is the Passover for the Hellenistic tract, the non-Israelite Christians. And then I would go along with that. We celebrate communion. One of the things I love most is serving communion to my family. I've only got to do it a couple times, but deeply meaningful to me. So the Passover is this commanded feast. My understanding right now, and I have a real shaky grasp on the feast, man. I mean, not even shaky grasp on the feast. But I see three, I think, that are commanded. And that's the Passover. Then there's something that happens, the Feast of Weeks, which happens like 40 days after Passover. Then there's trumpets. And there's things like the Feast of Weeks, as far as I can tell, is sort of connected to Passover. So but I don't think the smart people say that. That's just how I think of it. Then there's trumpets. And was it tabernacles? Those are the three that you supposedly have to observe. There's something else in there that I never hear people talk about, but God tells, and this goes back to the Hebrew roots thing when he's establishing the militia. And he says 3 times a year, all the men of Israel were supposed to come together in a host. And when they did that, he would protect the land while they were doing their militia training. God is so cool. But yeah, the militia takes on. I would love to talk to some men, Pastor Fox or somebody about that. You know, this part that we never talk about, where the host, the fighting men, are called up 3 times a year to report in. As being a part of this. I think we're missing something there that we need to look into. That's the feast. And, there was something else, and what comes after the feast? Oh, shucks. There was something important, too, I wanted to go into. I mean, it's really important. And I was running
Dietary.
Dietary! Oh,
Yeah.
How could I forget the dietary? Here we go. Is Vulgar Display of Truth leaving us? Thank you for stopping in, sir. Wes is leaving. Thank you for coming in, sir.
I think Volver's still here. He was just saying goodbye to somebody.
Oh.
But Dry Fire Faith is the one that wants to know about Peter's vision.
Okay, so here we go. Peter's vision, Dry Fire Faith, and the dietary laws. Dun, dun, dun. Here's where I lose all of my Torah observant brethren. Let me start off with this. We follow the dietary laws. And I believe that if you are going to be Torah observant, maybe I won't lose y'all. If you're going to be Torah observant, you need to follow the dietary laws. However, if you're on that Hellenistic track, you don't have to follow the dietary laws, people. It is clear. It is clear. Christ made it clear. He said, it's not what goes into man that makes him unclean. It's what comes out of him. Paul, there's 3 witnesses to this. Paul talks about it in length, not as much as the Hellenistic guys would like to make you think, but he makes it very clear that the kingdom of heaven isn't about what you eat. And then we've got God's vision to Peter. Now remember, Peter is the Torah observant guy, and even at that in the vision, he tells God, "Hey, Jolly, I haven't seen what's going on, Jolly. I haven't seen the chat because it distracts me and I lose my train of thought. But my email is therevoltingman@outlook.com. Yeah, therevoltingman@outlook.com. I'll be happy to correspond with you as much as I can. Okay, so back to Peter's vision. Peter tells God in this vision, I've never touched anything unclean. Now, you got to understand some things about being unclean. Uncleanliness actually didn't have anything to do with sin. You blow some Torah observant people's minds when you tell them this. Uncleanliness does not correspond to sin, okay? If you buried a dead body, clean. However, God commanded the Israelites to bury the dead. You were commanded by God, which would make you unclean. God was not commanding you to sin. Uncleanliness was not attached to sin. If you slept with your wife, you were unclean till sundown. There's nothing wrong with sleeping with your wife. I don't want to talk about some of the gross stuff, but there's things that make you unclean that have absolutely nothing to do with sin. So uncleanliness is not sin. That blows a lot of people's minds. I get a lot of raised eyebrows and whatnot. But there's no way for me to come up with an explanation for some of this stuff. Childbirth can lead to uncleanness. There's different periods that for I don't want to say purification. It's 30 days for like a girl and 60 for a boy, or the other way around. I don't remember. So uncleanliness isn't to do with sin. I don't really know what it has to do with, but I know it's not sin. So God commands Peter. He sends down this sheet with all these unclean animals on there. Pigs, lizards, vulture, catfish. Sorry, no scales. And tells Peter to kill and eat. He doesn't tell him just to eat. He says kill and eat. God tells him get all up in this stuff. You're not supposed to touch the carcass of an unclean animal, and you're certainly not supposed to eat it. And God was telling him to get all up in there. My Torah observant brethren will tell you that this was an analogy that God was telling Peter to preach to the Gentiles, and they were clean. Peter kind of already knew that. Maybe not. I won't argue that point. The thing is, God didn't lower a sheet full of Gentiles down to Peter and tell Peter to preach to the Gentiles. He lowered a sheet full of unclean animals down. God's command. Remember, when God speaks, let there be light. Universe, right? When God speaks, reality literally conforms itself to His words. In fact, His words are reality. That's it. I mean, what we experience as reality are simply the echoes of God's words. God spoke, "Let there be light." That echo is the world we live. The world we live in is just an echo of that. So that guy, that voice, lowered down a sheet to Peter and said, "Kill and eat." Okay. Yes, he was illustrating a larger point, but this is also him saying there's nothing else. I have made you clean. What he was saying is Christ's sacrifice cleansed us. There is nothing in this physical world that can overcome that. So think about it. There was this period I'm sorry, I'm getting real far afield. There was this period in Jewish history, and you may have heard of Maccabees and the Jewish revolt and this Greek guy named Antiochus Epiphanes IV decides he wants to make Jerusalem into this great Greek city called Antiochia, and he invades and he takes over the temple, and dedicates it to Jerusalem. He sacrifices a pig in there and sets up a a statue of Zeus in the temple. All right, the Jews resisted, I mean, valiantly. I mean, he had to just kill all of them almost. I mean, they just slaughtered them. There were dead Jews everywhere. They did everything in their power, laid down their lives to keep this from happening. Okay? But the temple was made unclean through no fault of their own. Okay? There is nothing. Antiochus Epiphanes IV, with all his armies, cannot come into your life now and make you unclean, the temple unclean, because the temple was being kept clean by the works of men, which I'm Torah observant, but the works of men are valueless, and you are made clean by Christ's sacrifice. So there's nothing physical that can overcome that. You know, there's nothing, there's no pig blood that can resist Christ. All right. Now, if you're Torah observant, you're on a different track. You have submitted yourself to this. You have taken these works on as an act of faith, and you're expressing your faith through these works, or you're experiencing your faith through these works. I don't have all the mechanism down. But if you're a Hellenistic Christian, you're not bound by those laws. That food unclean. That food cannot separate you from God. Now, there's a whole nother aspect of this I think you should take in consideration. But I want to draw a sharp line between what I'm about to say and what I just said. On the spiritual side, Torah observant Christians I would go so far as to say must obey those dietary laws. That's what being Torah observant is. They can't make you unclean, but these are God's commands. You have willingly submitted to obey these commands of God. Laws apply to you then. If you're on that Hellenistic track, I would still say there is a benefit to the dietary laws. Because what we said about God's words, when God speaks, that actually dictates reality. I mean, God's words are the reality we live in. And there will be benefits of avoiding those things he said to avoid. I don't have the mechanism in place to tell you, man, why there's a difference. I mean, I can give you the big picture, 30,000 foot stuff about Jesus' death, but I believe when Christ said that he did not come to abolish the law. Remember, Christ said, abolish the law, and not one jot and tittle will pass away until it is fulfilled. I don't like that translation sometimes, just until all is fulfilled. I think it refers to each individual piece. The cleanliness stuff has been fulfilled because Jesus cleansed us. And nothing outside of us can make us dirty. Christ cleansed us. Now, like I said, if you're Torah observant, you have willingly submitted to this and signed on for it. And there are some hard passages in Paul for us about that. Some very hard passages in Paul. But I believe, again, if you keep all the things in mind, what he's saying there is not that you're not submitting your salvation to those works. Your salvation's not submitted to those works. I can show you so many passages, and I will here in just a second. I'll leave you with kind of two passages that I really like, and then we'll engage in some conversation and back and forth here in a second. Everyone has not everyone, but you hear people, my life verse is, and usually it's something, nebulous that doesn't really apply, or doesn't really on. My life verse is Jesus wept because Jesus cried like I cry, or something, If I had a life verse, Ecclesiastes, actually, if I had a life verse, Ecclesiastes, I love that book. But there's one verse in there. It's Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13. And I wonder if I can find it, or if I'll just embarrass myself with how little I know where I find it. She actually has the books of the Bible memorized.
What do you need?
Ecclesiastes 12, verse 13. I didn't memorize the alphabet till I was in my years, and then I only memorized it so my brother would quit torturing me about it. I just don't like to memorize lists. I don't like to memorize anything. It takes mental discipline, and I have no mental discipline. But Ecclesiastes 12:13, she actually has them memorized in order. But I love this verse. The book of Ecclesiastes is this. It's short. It's only 12 chapters. This is like the second to last verse in it. But it's this book written by Solomon at the end of his life, where he's talking about all the things he did and why and what it meant. And you've probably heard the term vanity, vanity, all is vanity, or there's nothing new under the sun. These are quotes from the. Here's the second to last verse in the book of Ecclesiastes. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. He's wrapping up the whole book. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. There's a few things you don't see in there. There's a lot of things you don't see in there. There's nothing in there about love. There's nothing in there about a relationship. It's a relationship, brother. It's not about rules. It's about a relationship. No, your duty is not a relationship. Your duty, what God requires of you, is to fear him and keep his commandments. Now, if you're on that Hellenistic track, you have a slightly different set of commandments than the folks who are on the Torah observant track. One's not better than the other. We're all brothers. I can't, I've got to extend the right hand of fellowship to a Hellenistic Christian the same way they would have to extend the right hand of fellowship to me. But both of our duties is to fear God and keep his commandments. That's the whole duty. The whole duty. Now, that doesn't mean that's all required. That's not all there is, but that's the duty. That's what you have to do. You have to fear God and keep his commandments. And then we want to go to Revelations 14:12. I could actually find that one. Revelations is pretty easy. So as we're wrapping this up, I would say I don't remember what I was saying or why I went there. What did I say? 14:12. Mm-hmm. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. That one verse, and you could read what he's referring to, but that one verse kind of encapsulates the whole book. The commandments of God, the Old Testament, the faith of Jesus, the Gospels, and the New Testament. It's all right there. Wow, you know what? I may be right here at my absolute favorite passage in the whole book. Let's see if I can find it real quick since we're here. Stick with me for a second. Oh, yeah. Yeah, this motivates me. When I was in the Marine Corps, when I was a corporal, I was an NCO, and you had to carry this. You always had to have a book, and for some reason, a book to write in. And for some reason, we were all carrying these green books back then that were about this big. They had these green cloth books, and it just had lined papers on the inside, and all the corporals had the same book. It was the cool thing, and then you would, decorate your book with usually skulls and naked women with skulls and death from above and rabid squirrels eat blood at midnight. Just craziness. And I had this passage written on mine, and guys would read it and go, "Whoa, that's cool." So here we go. Let me read my favorite passage in all of Scripture, Revelations 19:11. This is the Jesus we're about to meet. This is Jesus the next time. What? This is Christ when we see him next. This is not the hippie with a goatee and Birkenstocks. Okay, listen to this guy. Revelations 19:11. And I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and he was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. We'll talk about that in a second too. He had a name written that no man knew but he himself. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood. And his name is called the Word of God. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. Doth go with a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. And he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God. And he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Jolly, I am sorry, sir, but you can take your pagans and bury them in a mountain of pig shit, because that is cool. I am sorry. There is nothing those old world pagans could do to compare to that. That's who's coming for us, people. That's who we're supposed to emulate. That's who we're supposed to be like. Not some. I hate what they turned Jesus into. This is Christ. This is the Christ we're supposed to be like. This. Oh, that's something you can build your life around. I love that. Oh, I get so motivated. But it says on there he has a name written that no one knows. When everyone gets all uppity about the name of God, his name is Yah. His name is Yahweh. His name is they come up with all kinds. Everyone thinks they know God's name. You don't know God's name. Get over it. You couldn't pronounce it if you did know it. Probably if you heard it, it would make you disintegrate. It would make your fathers disintegrate. Your whole line would disintegrate all the way back to the beginning. We don't know God's name. Anything you call him is going to just be a pseudonym, a title. So get over the whole, you have to call God this thing. Whatever you want to, whatever works for you. If you want to call him Yahweh, that's fine. Call him Yah, call him God, Elohim, whatever works for you. But we don't know his real name, so don't get lost on that merry-go-round. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm all spun up. Got to get calmed down. North Country Off Grid. That was Revelations 19, verse 11. Michael doesn't want to disintegrate. Suck it, pagans. The Romani say it's Duvel, which El is God, which means the unknown name, which makes sense. So there you go, man. I don't know if I answered any questions or not, Dean. I certainly appreciate you asking and giving me the chance to go off on a rant. There's some topics I really love. I should spend more time on this because, like I said, I don't have all the mechanics worked out. I don't have I can throw out there and do this rapid fire thing. Jolly, silly Christians, you can't kill paganism. Jolly, we don't want to kill paganism. We don't have to kill paganism. Paganism is dead. No one's heard from those pagan gods in thousands of years. We can strip naked and run outside and dance under and nothing happens. I wish it did, because that would be, hey, listen, pagan, listen, if I could choose my faith, it wouldn't be Christianity. It would be one that allowed me to dance naked under the moonlight. All right? I want to worship the great horned God. I'm sorry. That's cool. The Wiccans have the great horned God and the moon goddess, or whatever her name is, and they go outside and they light bonfires and they strip down naked and they hoot and holler, and it's a lot of fun. I'm all about it, man. It's not truth. It doesn't work. It's not real. And if we want to LARP, if we want to live action role play, then or the Raelians. The Raelians have a great religion. Oh my gosh, they got the Wiccans beat. The Raelians, the aliens want to the aliens seeded life on Earth. They brought some form of early life and put it here, and it developed. And the aliens are going to come back and visit us when we have the technology to build a spaceport for them to land at. I don't know how they landed the first time to put the life here, but this time they need a spaceport. And the way we communicate with the aliens is we have orgies. We have orgies, and our sexual energy communicates with the aliens, and we build a spaceport, and then they're going to come and visit us again. That's the great faith. Saber and right? If I could pick a faith, it might be the Raelians. But I don't get to pick a faith. I have to pick one that works. I know there has to be a God. I say there has to be a God, and He created this world for a reason. Obviously, it has beauty, and there's a logicness to it, even though there is death and destruction and entropy and decay as well. But He did it for a reason. So I have to try to figure out why He did it. What's the reason? Why did He put me here? Why did He create this universe? There's only one God that has consistently tried to communicate with us from the beginning, where there's an unbroken line of communication from the beginning up till now, and that is the Jewish/Christian God. He's the only one that fits the bill. No one else has tried to communicate with us consistently, where we can look back and say, oh yeah, he's tried every step of the way to keep us on track. Islam started. in what 6 something, but it really started in like 8 something when they finally compiled the Quran. There's nothing before. There's no revelation before Muhammad. Say, oh, this God was trying to reach us. It starts with Muhammad. All these other religions do, or they ended. They ended. I would love to worship Odin and Thor. That would be fantastic. I mean, that's a man-made religion. You can tell because it's so much fun. And it's just a religion you want to go get into to rape women until you get killed in battle, and you get to go to Valhalla and get drunk and fight and feast for the rest of eternity. A man made that religion, and you know what? Good on him, because that's the one I would make too if I could make one. But it ended. There was a break. You could look to a point where you said, well, this wasn't real. This because it is no more. So there you go.
Right Root suggests Seventh-day as a possibility.
When we first started on this, the Seventh-day Adventists is where we thought we were going to be. We didn't agree with everything, but they were really close, and we wanted to get as close as we could. There's a few problems I had with the Seventh-day Adventists. One of them, which they're pacifists, which I just couldn't deal with. And then there was the vegetarianism, and they got into some dispensationalism, if I recall. Some of their theology in other areas went places I couldn't go. And so they were far enough away that they were no better than, I shouldn't say no better, no different than any other denomination. So I just were, because it wasn't going to be that big of a difference. And I can't remember what there was one big red flag for me where it was why I decided I couldn't make the jump to the Seventh-day Adventist, and I don't remember what it was. But I don't know, it may have been once saved, always saved or something. I'm not saying that was it, but it was something along those lines. I don't remember.
Why does Sunday take precedence Saturday?
No one can. It goes way, 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 way back when you read the Church Fathers, and Kevin might know more about this than I do, Kevin Purrier. But real early on, the Church Fathers started trying to get rid of all the Hebrew and Jewish influence out of the church. And they never gave a really good explanation for why they decided they were going to jump to Sunday. They just said, hey, we're jumping to Sunday, and it's really bad not to do it. And so there were actually penalties for not going to Sunday church, or for observing the Sabbath, or going to church on the Sabbath, which again, nothing said you had to go to church on the Sabbath. That wasn't the whole point. So if you read the commands about the Sabbath and everything, even for those Hellenistic Christians, I would say, boy, there's some powerful stuff written about the Sabbath. Look at that Hebrews 4:4. To me, that seems to say that the Sabbath, the seventh day, is still in effect. Now, some people will tell you that Saturday isn't the original seventh day. That they'll come. Some people will be new moon Sabbaths, and they'll start the Sabbath over every month. It's very easy for me to disprove that to you why that's not true, because you're not working 6 days that way. You'll always have a weird week. Look, the Jewish people have an unbroken history going back a very long way, definitely to the time of Christ. We know that Christ celebrated the Sabbath on the day we call Saturday. There's an unbroken calendar from that day to this day. And we can go back 7 days at it. We could probably tell you which Saturday it was Christ did some of this stuff on. So Jesus celebrated Saturday, a Saturday Sabbath, a seventh-day Sabbath. Now, look, if you were in a horrible storm at sea, and the sky was dark for a month and a day, and the ship wrecked, and you were at sea, and you washed up on a beach in a coma, and you had no idea the concept of the length of time that had passed, and you started, you said, oh, well, 7 days have definitely passed. I'm going to observe a Sabbath, and then went from there every 6 days. and then you were rescued in years and found out you were observing the Sabbath on the Sunday, you'd be okay. All right, God said 6 days you shall work, seventh you shall rest, and yes, you can come up with a scenario whereby you can say the day doesn't really matter. We know the day. We have an unbroken history of the day. So there's no reason not to do what Jesus did in this case, which is do the Sabbath on Saturday. What did I miss?
Jay is following up just a little bit. He says he wants to do the correct Sabbath. Seems too much unnecessary work. What do we do on the Sabbath?
The worldly Sabbath seems too much unnecessary, too much church for us. So like we talked about earlier, we do attend a mainstream church on Sundays. Sunday morning is the day we go. We go Wednesday night too. When their kids' programs are on, we go Wednesday night. Because we're commanded to forsake not the gathering together unto ourselves. We're supposed to gather with other Christians. I would prefer to do that on Friday night with other Torah observant Christians. I don't have that option here. So we do go to a Sunday morning service most Sundays to fulfill that command to forsake not the gathering together. And it has been. Now, what do we do on the Sabbath is nothing. You're commanded to rest on the Sabbath. You're not commanded to church, period. Church is not a command, okay? Church is a principle that helps you fulfill things like gathering together, like studying and training and whatnot, and bringing up your children. And there's some imperatives that we have to do that church helps us accomplish. But church is not an imperative. And it doesn't matter what day you go to church on. If you go once a week or once a month, church has become an idol for a lot of Christians on both sides of this, the Torah observant and the Hellenistic ones. I think it's a really good idea to go to church once a week. It is not a command. It is not an imperative. It is a principle.
Here's Free America.
Hey, Free America, how you doing, sir? Have you ever heard of the Hebrew calendar? The seventh day doesn't always match up with Saturday. If you look at Lamentations 2, the Sabbaths were taken away. I am not familiar with Lamentations 2, Free America, and I would have to look at that. I do know Zephaniah is the book. I said that after the day of judgment we were given a pure language. Yes, Zephaniah is a name very near and dear to us. I am not familiar, Free America, with Lamentations 2 right off the top of my head. I do know Lamentations obviously is a book by Jeremiah after the destruction of Israel, and they're all taken into captivity. And it has some pretty. Its main focus may be pretty specific, but I don't know about that chapter 2. I'd have to read it. I guess the Lord has showed me to come to Torah. I am lost in the church doctrine. Well, Jay, if we have helped you at all, we are very, very humbled and excited. And if you need any guidance, the email address is therevoltingman@outlook.com. Evidently, none of you folks knows about the great turtle. Oh, David, you're not going to tell us something really personal, are you? Frank goes 3 to 4 times a week online. Awanas, yes, Dry Fire. Awanas is the program we have the kids in. Yeah, and it's a pretty good program. Ain't perfect, but nothing is. Anyway. Wow, another hour and a half, and that one went really, really quick. I could keep talking about that for a very long time. Is Jolly still with us, or did I run you off, Jolly?
I'm sure he's probably still there.
Kevin Purrier knows this stuff pretty well. And actually, I remember having this conversation in another forum we're involved in about the Gregorian Julian calendar stuff. Chief, we have trouble with we have the cheap internet. We have the cheapest internet, so I think our upload speeds are pretty low. We maybe don't have the technology.
Bannon wants to know our email again.
TheRevoltingMan@outlook.com. She's beautiful when she smiles. She's beautiful all the time, Crystal. Okay, well, guys, I've enjoyed this to no end. I would keep going for a long time. I love these. I'm afraid I will. Mama on a budget.
This is dry fire faith life.
Oh, revolting woman, what do you do for Bible study? Wonderful. We are doing the easy peasy HS curriculum, but the Bible isn't too in depth. Mama, actually supposed to be my job, and right now all I really do is I read a chapter of the Bible with the boys. Some stuff in homeschool, don't you?
Nothing regular yet.
I read a chapter probably 3 or 4 nights a week, most nights. We don't do Wednesday. We generally don't do Sunday. I try to do it the other nights. I don't always, but we read a chapter of the Bible, and that's pretty much all I'm doing right now. It has been my goal to start a Sabbath lesson with them once a week. I have not gotten it done yet, and I should. There shouldn't be any priority more important to that than that in my life, and I just haven't gotten it done. But that's our take on that. Religious instruction is the father's duty, and a mother can. There's no, I mean, I would to fill in, but that's the extent of it right now, and I have to get on the ball on that. So.
Oh, I get to talk? Hey, Frank. My name is in the Bible. It's from the Bible, my parents. But they also watch the movie, of course. So it's Mount Moriah.
Yeah, and some neat things happen on Mount Moriah in the Bible. The temple is situated on Mount Moriah. Abraham was commanded to sacrifice Isaac on Mount Moriah. And I believe Mount Moriah is one of the places where God's feet is going to step when he first comes back. I may not have that right. I may be wrong about that. Yeah. Dry Fire, let me go ahead and do that again. Dry Fire Faith has a channel, guys. It's a good channel. He talks about important stuff, and he's almost always right. Actually, I haven't heard a time when I disagreed with you yet, Dry Fire. So check out Dry Fire. Oh, Christmas, Craig. Craig, we had a Christmas video, and we lost a bunch of subscribers over it, and they were mostly Torah types, because this could take a while. So let's start with Easter. Easter's bad. Easter's no good, even for Hellenistic Jews, Hellenistic Christians. Jeez, I'm sorry, guys. Here's the deal with Easter. It's set up as a holy day. God hates our holy days. And Easter is set up as a holy day. So Easter's no good. The only holy days are God's holy days. Christmas, for me, isn't as big of a deal. When it was set up as a holy day, it was a big deal. I don't think it's a holy day. I don't think anyone really treats it like a holy day. So I'm going to be real honest and open with you here, guys. I don't have a big problem with Christmas. We have been stepping back from it for a long time. Even before we went Torah observant, we were stepping back from Christmas because it doesn't fit in with who we are. The presents and the commercialism, and it just feels really bad. I mean, there's like this 5-minute frenzy, this orgy, this feeding frenzy, paper, and then everyone's sort of left just feeling a little dirty and a little bloated and a little ashamed of themselves. And so we were already moving away from Christmas. I'm probably going to cut it out entirely, form with the Torah observant community. I'm going to give in to peer pressure, because you lose all credibility with Torah observant folks if you haven't rejected Christmas yet. And my take on Christmas is that, you know what, Jesus was born at some point. We don't know when. It probably was not, although it's possible. The December 25th date was mentioned very, very, very early in church history. Like people who knew people who would have known Jesus. So like 2 generations removed. We're talking about how December 25th was his birthday. I don't know how that works. I don't think it probably is the date. I don't think the date is important. If we picked, 4 weeks to to learn about and celebrate and focus on Jesus' birthday, and we just had a themed sermon for 4 weeks in some random point, no one would bat an eyelash at that. But sometimes on the observant messianic side, we're in such a hurry to separate ourselves from the traditions and some of the foolishness that's crept into the faith, that we get a little too spun up about things that aren't that important. And Christmas is one of those things we just too spun up about. But on both sides of the argument now. Now my Hellenistic friends out there, let's be honest. There is nothing in the Bible about what day Jesus was born on, or celebrating his birthday, or anyone's birthday. And for us to get all shocked and outraged, no, Christmas, how dare? Yeah, that's a tradition of man, okay? And as long as it's kept in its place, fine, no big deal. But don't make it into something more than it is. In fact, if you make it into something more than it is, then I have to reject it. We have this wonderful tradition that we would do, where every year the first weekend after Thanksgiving, we would go up to this Christmas tree farm in North Carolina and hike all the way to the top of this giant mountain and cut a wild Christmas tree. The tallest, we'd go as far up as we could and get the wildest Christmas tree we could. Beautiful tradition. Loved it. You're up here looking down on there's eagles flying beneath you while you're cutting this Christmas tree, and I feel like I have to give it up now, and it drives me crazy because there's no real spiritual reason why we have to give it up. Although now Pope, and so did already, Jeremiah, I think it's chapter 10, verse 2, and it says, don't bring into your house, cut trees and fashion them with gold and silver and nails, and it's talking about idols. It's not talking about Christmas trees. And if you read the whole passage, it says don't fashion idols the way the pagans do, and then it talks about the way they make idol, cutting down a tree, fashioning it with nails and silver and gold. The way I interpret Scripture, if it was referring to a Christmas tree, as long as you didn't use nails and silver and gold on your Christmas tree, you wouldn't run afoul of that verse. But if you actually read the whole passage and not just that one verse, you'll see it's a much bigger command than just Christmas trees. It's referring to not worshiping the works of your own hand, not forming idols, not worshiping as the pagans do. And if you're still with us, Jolly, I apologize. But the Bible is really pretty hard on pagans. So there you go on that. Now, so that's me on Christmas. I'm a little disturbed that I can't go cut my Christmas tree anymore. I don't even really have to put it up, but I sure did like to trip up there to get it. Maybe we could just bring it back and use it for firewood. I don't know. And the people who own the Christmas tree farm are really cool. And I knew their grandfather when he ran it, and he died, and then his son-in-law took it over. And he's got a son who's kind of cool, and they recognize us when we come every year, and it's really cool. And it drives me nuts that peer pressure is going to make me give up my Christmas tree trip.
Emerson says, what about using computer on Shabbat?
So hey Emerson, how you doing, sir? We were just talking about Brazil earlier. Is there some there? I hadn't heard about it, but I think Vulgar Display of Truth was telling me he was reading about some unrest. Emerson, here's my thing about the Sabbath. We're commanded to rest on the Sabbath and not do servile work. So, in my opinion, a farmer could work on his novel on the Sabbath, and a novelist could go outside and play at being a farmer. As long as you're not working, so a computer technician probably shouldn't work on computers on the Sabbath. But I should say, at Emerson, if I remember correctly, you have a Jewish, an actual, a Jewish lineage, a racial Jewish background. We were talking earlier about the difference between some of the Talmudic practices and some of the traditions that the Talmud built up around some of this stuff versus, what a Torah observant guy like me would only look straight to the Old Testament, the law, Leviticus and Deuteronomy, and do what it says. And when I look at the laws and the rules in those books about the Sabbath, it's don't work. don't kindle a fire. I guess you could maybe make I hadn't thought about this. I guess you could make the argument that electricity is a spark of some kind. I'm not sure. I've taken that literally though, and I always do try to take it literally. You know, we don't light fires on the Sabbath, which for us is actually meaningful because we heat with wood. So in the winter, that's something. I have never thought about using the computer on Sabbath. Off the top of my head, I don't feel like it would violate anything for me and my work, really. I think we clock in and out on a computer, but other than that, you know, the computer doesn't represent work for me. That would definitely fall into rest. Emerson always has really interesting comments. He doesn't comment that often, but when he does, it's always an interesting one. You say yes here, Emerson. Are you talking about the... Oh, that you're Jewish? I wasn't sure if you're talking about that or the unrest in Brazil. All right, Ken Fannin, what about Matthew 12? That sounds like a big topic. I don't know if I've got time to read the whole chapter here real quick, but... Hi, Rob. How you doing, sir?
Oh, it's the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. I mean, it was...
Okay, so...
Remember when they're plucking the ears of corn?
Okay. So yeah, this is another interesting one us Torah observant guys would go to. And we would say that, you know, this is where the Pharisees, not legalists, they had come up with some principles that helped them observe the Sabbath. But those principles weren't direct. There's nothing wrong with those principles, completely fine. But they were giving those principles the weight of God's word and trying to force other people to observe those principles instead of just the imperative. And that's what Christ is talking about there. He was saying God is Lord of the Sabbath. It's God's laws that rule the Sabbath, not man's laws. And the Pharisees were trying to get some of their laws in there and force everyone. And this is a human trait. You know, you see it even today, you know, especially today, where people want to use the church and the mechanism of the church to control and get authority and power and influence. We're really hard on the Pharisees. We forget that the Pharisees are us. When Jesus was talking to the Pharisees, when we read that as modern Christians, we need to take the Pharisees out and insert ourselves in, because everything they did, we want to do. There's nothing different between them and us. In fact, I have often thought how grateful I am I did not live in that time period, because my naturally conservative bent probably would have had me I probably would have been I don't know if I'd have been a Sadducee or a Pharisee. It's hard to say. But those have not been open to Christ's message, because, you know, I would say, wait a minute, you know, this is not what I was expecting. This is not what I was taught. And I would have very, very likely would have been one of those "Go and crucify him." And we all need to think about it in that light. You know, we all need to put ourselves in that spot. So yes, the Lord of the to rest on the Sabbath, which is the seventh day. And since God is the Lord of the Sabbath, we don't the definitions and say, no, it's the first day.
Somebody said the car is, shoot, where'd it go? A car is fire in a sense.
Oh yeah, dry fire. Yeah, there's spark in a car. Yeah, you would have to look at the word kindle and the word fire and make up your own mind. This is where I would say there is no authority between you and God. If you can read it and honestly say you believe that the words mean this, and if you're wrong, and if you're in the right spirit and you have a humble spirit before God and you're wrong, He will correct you. He will get you on the right path if your spirit is correct and you are honestly trying to adhere to His word. That's the thing. You know, let's talk about something else about Paul real quick. Let's remember this guy Paul. I get pissed about Paul sometimes. I get really angry about Paul occasionally. But here's this guy. This was earlier. I may tell a little bit. I may get too revelatory here. There was a time in my life when I was horrifically addicted to something embarrassing that many men are addicted to, and this was long before I was anywhere close to being where I am today. And I would do all the things Christian men were supposed to do to beat this addiction. Fasting, praying, deliverance, accountability, monitoring software on your computer and everything. And I used to get so mad because nothing I would ever do would help me kick this, habit, addiction. And then I would read about Paul, and here you got this Paul, this Pharisee, who was murdering Christians, literally murdering Christians, holding people's coats while they stoned Stephen, and was persecuting the church almost out of existence. Hated the church so much that he got authority from the Sanhedrin to go to somewhere else entirely and persecute them over there. And here he is on the road to Damascus to go kill Christians, and God's like, boom, white light, knock him off the horse. Paul, I'm calling you to do my work, and you're the worst sinner in the world, but I'm going to turn you into the Moses of the New Testament. You're going to be the second most significant character of the New Testament. After Christ himself, next comes Paul in significance. And I used to get so mad. Oh, I get angry. I'm praying to you, and I'm fasting, and I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, and you won't take this away from me. And of course, anytime you're mad at God, you're in the wrong. But I finally realized at some point, he was like, you know what? Paul was a murderer. He was persecuting the church. But he was doing it because he thought he was doing everything in his power to please God. He was doing everything he knew to do to be righteous in front of God. His spirit was humble before God. And God saw that, and God came down and got him and said, oh, I can use this guy. This is a man with a heart for me. This is a man who wants to obey my commands and do my work and please me. I'm going to get him sorted out and get him on the right path, and we're going to do something with this boy. If we could get our minds right that way, like Paul's mind was right, his heart was right. Maybe his mind was wrong and his heart was right. I don't know what you want to say. If you're wrong but your heart's right and you're trying to do right, if you're putting, it can't just be. You see, now this is dangerous because you trend back over here to it's nothing but a relationship. You just gotta love them, brother. It's all about love. No, it's not. You have to be trying to obey. To the extent you understand, you have to be putting works to your faith, actions to your faith. But if you have a sincere faith and you're sincerely trying to apply your best understanding of what God wants of you to that faith, he is going to make sure he gets you on the right track. You may not like how he does it. It might be a blinding white light. You might get knocked on your butt and be blind for 3 days. You might find yourself losing all of your positions and wealth and honor and well, if you ever read that list of things Paul goes through, beaten, stoned, left for dead, a day and a night in the deep, cold, hungry, naked, hot, you may not like where it takes you, but he will take you. And that's another one of those cool things about God. Why don't folks read all of Mark 7? Now, we just touched on Mark 7 earlier. Were you with us when we did that, Jay? We did Mark 7 around 13. Mm-hmm. What verses are you wanting us to look at, Mark?
I doubt it's the last half of it.
Do verse 9 real quick, because I think we talked about that. Full well ye reject the commandment of God, that you may keep your own tradition. That's one of the ones the Torah observant folks go to. And then he's just given examples. Then we got a Gentile showing her faith. That which cometh out of the man that defileth the man. We talked about that. I'm not sure. Tell us what you're talking about. Who was that, Jay?
Yeah, I think so.
Frank's given a powerful testimony. Free America, I have another personal little favorite theory, pet theory. But I believe that the rich who came to Christ and asked, what must I do to be saved? And Christ listed off some of the 10 Commandments, and the rich young ruler says, oh, I've done that since I was a youth. What else do I need? And Christ tells him, sell all that you have and follow me. I personally believe that was Paul. Paul was in Jerusalem, and I think he even could have been there during Christ. Actually, I think he would have been there during Christ. So I believe that Paul was personally called by Jesus to be an apostle at that point, and didn't come, possibly by divine appointment, and didn't respond at that time, and then later on, did fulfill his call. I can't back that up with anything but my own speculation, but it ties a neat little bow around some things for me. Where I stand on it right now, I think apostles only had to be directly called by Christ. I don't think apostles are still a thing now. A lot of people disagree with me on that, and that would make that much neater. Oh, Emerson, do you observe the oral tradition? We do not observe the Talmud for a number of reasons. None of them are antagonistic, though. It's not, the evil Talmud. And none of the articles are the Articles of Zion. What was the craziness they used to accuse the Jews of back in the 1900s? I think it was the Articles of Zion. No Articles of Zion stuff. We strip out all traditions. We strip out Christian traditions, Western traditions, American traditions. We also, we're not accepting in anyone else's traditions. If it's not in the Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament, then for now we're keeping it at arm's length. There may come when we find some value in some traditions and we let them back in, but not until I've gotten confident that we have found a firm foundation, sort of a stable plateau to build from. That we have the imperatives right before we start adding back in any principles. So I find a lot of interest in the Talmud and the oral traditions. I think they can illuminate a lot of stuff for us. But for me, they have to be a secondary or possibly even a tertiary source, especially anything that came after Christ. For us, the Messiah has come for us, and anything that doesn't acknowledge that is kind of starting off already on a separate sort of lane than we're at. Oh, look at that. Kevin has that said my pet theory thought to me. Thank you for taking that away from me, Kevin. I appreciate that. Here, I thought I'd had one original thought in my entire life, and you just took it away. I'm kidding. Thank you for bringing that up. That's in Protocols of Zion. Bill's with us. How you doing, sir? I didn't see you sneak in. Good to have you. Yeah, Protocols of Zion. That makes Protocols of Zion. I guess you just read Zion for the articles. I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Crystal. That's very kind. What?
For America's asking about the Book of Jasher.
I don't accept any of the apocryphal books free, especially Jasher. As I recall, and I'm pulling this from memory, so I may have this wrong, and this is something else Kevin probably knows really well. But the provenance of Jasher is suspect. I believe what we have that's called the Book of Jasher kind of magically appeared like in the 1600s or 1500s or something. It hasn't been around that long, and it doesn't have a clear chain of custody from there to where. But I do believe it is one of those that's referenced, but we just don't have the original as far as I can tell. And I kind of hold all the apocryphal books at arm's length, like the Talmud. The apocryphal, the canon was closed for me. There's nothing to add to Scripture, and if we could add to it, there's no reason why the Muslims can't add to it, or the Mormons can't add to it, or the Jehovah's Witnesses can't add, or all the groups that come up with this other book and say, oh no, we've got you guys were close, but you got it wrong. We've got it right. And I say, well, I'm sorry, the canon's closed. Bam, it ended at Revelation. Nothing else. I would be interested to know more about it, though, Free, once you finish reading it. Frank's been sober that's the year before I graduated high school, Frank. So that's what, 16 years, 34 years. Congratulations, Frank. 34 years sober. That's impressive. I think the originals are held hostage in the Vatican. That is entirely possible. John 19. Didn't we do something with John 19?
He's saying the rich young leader is in John 19.
Oh, okay. I think I had here to deal with it. But I did a really poor job on my notes, and I apologize, man. I should have put more into it. It is possible that they are, yes. The 1611 King James Bible does have the Apocrypha in it. It is listed as the Apocrypha, though. And so, I mean, just like, my Bible here has a bunch of notes in the back and a bunch of historical information and stuff. It's a Thompson chain reference. Very useful. But, just because it's inside the bound leather covers doesn't make it inspired scripture, obviously. The chain reference part. And I would say the same thing about the Apocrypha. Ruth is one of my favorite stories. Ruth is a beautiful story. Okay, so Kevin's saying the oldest copy of Masher is Jasher is 4th century. Gad is 16th century. No Ruth or Esther. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Burden. We accept Ruth and Esther. They're part of the Old Testament canon. Jesus would have read Ruth and Esther when he studied Torah as a boy. Ruth has a lot of spiritual lessons in it, but Esther is a historical book. So, like, I take Esther as being what the events listed in Esther for me happened. They are true. The events that in Ruth are also true. They happen, but they're spiritual, direct. They're to teach a direct spiritual lesson, and give us an insight into the lineage of Christ. Remember, Ruth, the Moabitess, is in the lineage of Christ. She marries Boaz. Boaz ends up being King David. Ruth and Boaz have a son who ends up being King David's grandfather, I believe. So I think anyway. Ruth and Boaz's son becomes King David's, I believe, grandfather, and therefore, Ruth the Moabitess is then in the lineage of Christ. There is some speculation that Ruth was actually a Hebrew, an Israelite. There weren't Jews per se at the time. The Jews didn't come around till after the Babylonian captivity, I think. Well, there was a split. The kingdom split. Israel split into two different kingdoms, and I don't think the Jews came along until after they came back from the Babylonian captivity. But I may be getting on that. But there weren't Jews at that. But she was possibly an Israelite who had immigrated to Moab, just like her husband's family had done. So it's possible as an Israelite, but Ruth the Moabitess in the book, and so I accept that she was a Moabitess, and you have this non-Israelite in the lineage of Christ. We lost Jimmy due to buffering issues, huh? Biddy Boo graduated in '87. Chief, 3 years before me. You're a young guy. Yeah, no, Crystal, Ruth is a neat story. David graduated 2 years before I was born. Judah was one of the 12 tribes. But what we call Jews are actually the tribe of Judah, a portion of the tribe of Benjamin, and whatever Levites were mixed in. Paul was a Benjamite. So what we call Jews aren't just the tribe of Judah, but it's largely the tribe of Judah. We're talking about this with Emerson in the room. I'm going to say something wrong. Yeah, Mike feels young. Frank's the elder. 68, and it was obviously a very good year. Gosh, it's 11 o'clock. All right, let's. Any final thoughts before we wrap this thing up, baby? I've been talking a lot. You want to? It's Frank. It's between you and Dave.
What? Why did you take the Torah?
Why did I take the Torah?
Or what? I mean, what would you tell somebody who's interested in
if you're observant track, I would say that it is a calling. Feel you're being called to it. It appears to be something a lot of people are being called to right now, and I would heed that call. Things have changed for me since I've started coming down this track. And now I'll be honest with you, what brought me down this track was patriarchy. I came out of a bad marriage where I was trying to do all the modern uh, uh, focus on the feminism light, really conservative man-based stuff until I took my blinders off and realized it's complementarianism is what they call that stuff, and it's it's just feminism light. Uh, the patriarchy, the whole thing, trying to figure out where I went wrong and what happened, and it was a little bit more than that too. Coming out of all that, I had this crisis of everything, of faith, of personal everything. I mean, I was just a smoldering heap, and I threw everything away. I just said, I know one thing. I know there's a God because creation is here and it had to come from somewhere. So that means there's a creator. The only God that makes sense, I won't go back to that whole, is the Christian God, or the God of Abraham and Jacob and Isaac. And so I'm starting. There's that God. He's there. He's trying to communicate to me through this book. But I don't believe anything else. There's nothing else I believe except that God's trying to communicate to me through this book. And I started there, and a lot of good things started happening for me out of nowhere, that I can't take credit for. And I ended up here where I am today. And I'm still not completely. I don't have all this figured out, man. I don't. I'm not sure. What it's going to look like even in. I would say, what was it 2 years ago? Pig roast. When did we roast a pig? It was only 2 years ago. I had a pig up in the pen. I've showed you guys the pen in a couple of videos, and we were having a giant pig roast and having our friends over here having an orgiastic pig roast. So we are not very far down this path. I cannot promise you what it will look like in another 2 years. I can tell you I feel very, very confident and we're going. I still have questions. I'm sure I will always have questions. C.S. Lewis probably died with questions. Pete and Paul both probably died with questions. Rambling Mountain Rose. That's a pretty name. Shalom, Rambling Mountain Rose. Was CM here?
Combat medic. Somebody else.
Oh. Well, I'm sorry I missed you, whoever you were. Have a good evening. I thought Cheryl was with us for a second.
I'll show you where it is. Combat medic. Medical.
Oh, and yeah, we'll definitely keep you in our prayers, Combat Medic. Thank you for doing that. And did Kevin say he's leaving? Mm-hmm. Kevin, good night, brother. We love you. And then, it was Ramblin' Rose who said shalom. Shalom, Ramblin' Rose. And Kevin was talking. I might remember her as Rainbow Rose. If you've commented before, Rainbow, or I hate being rude to people. Type 56 Kalashnikov review win. Hey Charlie, how you doing? I tell you what, Charlie, when you lend me your Kalashnikov, I will review it. It's good to see you. What are you doing, young man? It's 11 o'clock at night. It's past your bedtime, isn't it? Ramblin' Mountain Rose, I'm sorry. I hope you're not leaving because I couldn't remember you.
No, she's telling somebody else.
Oh, okay. Charlie, are you just getting here? Did you miss all of our talk? What are you talking about, David? Are you guys playing poker? Emerson, it is too. We appreciate you hanging out with us that long, Emerson. I don't remember if I've told you this or not, but I got to spend 3 weeks in Brazil one time. And we spent a week in Brasilia and then 2 weeks in Rio de Janeiro, but we were on a missions trip, so I didn't get to see the Copacabana and back off in the hills and everything. But it was a beautiful people. I was there during an election, and I can't remember the name of the two guys running. This would have been about 89 or 90, maybe even 88. But it was a very, very eye-opening, interesting trip. I can remember inflation was real bad at the time, and people would write notes on, like post-it notes on not dollar bills, but on whatever the paper currency was. And I guess after they'd read the note, they would just crumple it up and throw it away because it was, it had been devalued so much. And I thought I was getting rich. I was picking up these, crumpled up banknotes or currency notes off the ground, and I was like, look at all this money I've got. And they're like, you couldn't turn that in for a candy bar. It's nothing. But anywho, Charlie just got here. Chiefs got the deal. Zach, you in? Been on for about 2 hours. I can't believe that. Missions to Rio during Mardi Gras. I mean, did Dean leave us? Crystal, I did not notice the book. I'm sorry. Did you see what book she mentioned?
Yeah.
Okay.
She's another white baby. I think.
Charlie, we got a guy from Brazil in here. You can't tell him his country is garbage. It's a beautiful country. It's a beautiful people. They've got some things to work out, but yeah, that's what someone was saying earlier, Emerson, is that there's some unrest going on right now. I hadn't heard about it till he mentioned it. I'll have to look at it, but I hope that's not the case. Brazil has always been near and dear to my heart. Dean is still among us. You make it sound like I said he was dying, David.
He wants to make a shameless plug.
Yes, Dean, you are a moderator for a reason, sir. That is because I trust your judgment. Hanging up on some poor troll. So I'm waiting for your plug, Dean.
We gotta figure out how to do split screens.
Oh yeah, like Step 1 Survival does, and we can have Burden and Dean and someone else down here, Chief or somebody. This round table conversation going on. I really like Step 1 Survival's live streams. He does a good job. Dryfire, you have an AK that you would lend me. That would be greatly appreciated, actually. We need to talk about that because I have a series of videos I want to do that require an AK-47, and I have not been able to find anybody that has one. So shoot me an email with your email, and we will talk. Because I cannot justify the expense right now for that. The 3 or 4, maybe 5 videos I want to do. But I would dearly love to have an AK to do that with. Oh, Dean is launching his channel. Okay, that should be an interesting channel. Dean is a vet, Army vet. Help me out, Dean. Airborne? I don't remember. He has been on our channel. I'm actually a little worried that his channel is going to take him away from our channel, which, it's selfish of me, but he's been such a big part of what we've done here that I'm sure his channel will be very interesting and well worth checking out. And I certainly hope, I hope he does really, really well, but still stays involved with us. I hope he's like Wrangler Star, but still my moderator. All right, Charlie, I'm hoping to get enough summer money to get a Russian SKS. The prices are really going up on those, Charlie. And Dean, when you get it up and running, shout out. I owe Wes S a shout out too. Wes S has a channel that's pretty informative. How about to exchange some experiences about Brazilian troubles? Actually, that's a really good idea, Emerson. Just, preparedness and troubles are one of the things we focus on here. I don't remember, the email, if you want to correspond, is therevoltingman@outlook.com. Dean Golberry, Army 10 years. We've got a lot of vets here. We're very proud of that. But we should talk, Emerson, and because I think you're right. I think there's a lot of instruction to be had from some of Brazil's experiences. Oh no, not like Wrangler Star. I like Wrangler Star, Burden. He's cool. I do want to know though if this baby they have is it their baby or did they adopt it? Not that it matters. It's completely irrelevant. But still, you'd like to know. but like I said, it wouldn't affect anything. But the baby just showed up out of nowhere. Big, fat, beautiful, bouncing baby. I mean, gorgeous child. Okay, Ramblin' Mountain Rose. We were talking tonight about Torah observance. It is the, I don't want to say religious system, but it is how we worship here. What Torah observance is that we don't believe that the Old Testament was done away with when the New Testament came about. That there's sort of two tracks Christians can worship. One is kind of the mainstream track you may be familiar with. The other is Torah observance, where you adopt some of the customs and forms of worship in the Old Testament. For us, that's we'll skip the awkward one. The awkward one, the dietary laws, the Sabbath, Saturday Sabbath, the feast days, and if something wasn't specifically done away with in the Old Testament, we believe for those Torah observant Christians, it's still valid. So that's that in a nutshell. If you watch Viking Preparedness at all, they might not use that term Torah observant, but we identify closely with sort of how they are. Maybe not exactly.
This video will be up too, so if they want to go back and watch it.
Yeah, this video will be up too, so if you want to go back and see what we were talking about. I would not expect you to watch all 2 hours, though. Dean, are you talking about what your channel is going to be? I may have missed
History.
that. History.
Focus on history.
Oh, I love history. So this will definitely be a channel I'm subscribed to, and will be one of the few I watch. I don't get to watch that many anymore.
Is he going to keep his name? That's all I want to know.
R563, proud of helping criminals commit industrial mass murder, unsubbed, bye-bye. Well, I'm sorry we lost you, R563. I don't know. I mean, I can assume what you were talking about, but I'm not for sure. Shabbat Shalom, Rose. You have an AK-74 and a 47? I would prefer the 47 for a couple of reasons. Mostly because I really like tweaking the 7.62 by 39 guys. And because the ammunition's a little more affordable. Yeah, Charlie, you're right. Actually, the round from the AK-74, it's a 5.45 by 39 millimeter, is similar to the round from the AR-15, which is a 5.56 by 45 millimeter. And Frank is always within arm's length of his Bible and his firearm. Hoorah! Chief got R560 whatever. R563. Proud of helping the criminals commit industrial mass murder. I'm so confused. Is he thinking that I am some sort of fascist that is good with the murder of Jews, or is he thinking I'm a Zionist who supports Israel, which I do actually support Israel, but I'm just wondering which direction he's coming from. Crystal prefers my knives. What kind of knives you got, Crystal? I'm trying to look at your picture here to see who I'm dealing with.
Let's see Crystal here.
Charlie's getting a wants a World War I era Luger. They are pretty interesting, Charlie. Neat design for its time. Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask Adam. I didn't think moderator. Do you know? Did you know?
The ones in blue are moderators. I don't know what the symbols all that mean.
No, because Chief's a moderator.
I don't know, because there's a lot of people with those little tool symbols. It's all screwed up, I think.
Crystal has several Bowies. Yeah, I like a Bowie knife. Dry fire. I'll have a.
He's in California, isn't he?
Are you in California, dry fire?
Or no, Texas?
Texas.
Texas.
We're not going to ask you to drive.
Yeah, no, that's Texas.
We're not going to ask you to drive all that way, dry fire. If we can't figure out some other arrangement, that's too much to ask. David has a Constitution in a 9mm within 3 inches of his hand as I type. Biddy's leaving us. Good night, Biddy. Thank you for coming out. We always appreciate it. The blue dots are my kitty ear headphones. Ah. What is Hagen, Chief? I've seen you.
Have a good night.
Have a good night. Oh. I was about to get insulted for video. I was like, don't you call her that. What the heck? I mean, you're funny and all, but there's limits, man. 7.62 by 25 is an inch. It is for a pistol, obviously, and there's a submachine gun that was chambered in it. I seem to remember there being some problems with it, and I don't remember off the top of my head what it was. Forgotten Weapons had a really good video on it, though. And so if you're interested in 7.62 by 25, it's the Tokarev, 7.62 by Tokarev. Forgotten Weapons has a really good video on it. Crystal's nickname is Kitty. Oh, Dry Fire's got the 74 chambered in 5.56. That's interesting. You know, Dry Fire, the Galil makes an interesting 5.56. Chief, yeah, I try to carry every day, everywhere, every time, or whatever it is. I'm not as good as I should be. Sometimes, you know, it's like, oh, I'm running to Home Depot. And here's something else, and this is silly. You know, I've got that homemade, which is kind of cool until you're out and about and you start feeling cheesy with your homemade holster on your. I've got this leather cowboy boot holster, nylon tactical web belt, and I feel silly sometimes. But I try to carry every day, every day, everywhere. I don't carry to work, obviously. They don't let us, and church has asked us not to carry there, which I would still carry there if it was more concealable, but it's a full-size .357 Magnum revolver. So, once Mariah gets comfortable with her pistol we got her, I'm going to shoot it a little bit and see if I'm still having trouble with limp wristing with my hand and my wrist injury. And if I'm not, I may consider switching back over to a semi-automatic. I am emotionally attached to revolvers, but you know, a 4-inch, you know, full-size service revolver like that is not easy to conceal. And I want to say, you know, open carry is the way to go, and you should assume a man's carrying anyway. So why wouldn't you just open carry? That's harder to do in practice. Sometimes I found they would just prefer to be concealed and not be conspicuous. I'm trying to make myself be ideologically pure and stay true to my 30,000-foot view of the way it should be, but I can't always force myself to do that. But I do. I try to carry, especially if I'm going to be out with the family. You know, if I'm out by myself, sometimes is when I'm like, yeah, you know, whatever. But I try to always have it on when I'm out with the family. Oh, I missed whatever's going on with Frank and David. Ah, Emerson has machetes, 2 or 3 Bowies, Opinel, a 38 special, and a 22 air rifle. We are not allowed to carry. I gotta be honest, Emerson, I'm surprised you're allowed to have the 38 special. Chief conceals. Crystal's in Tennessee. That's just north of here, Crystal. We're not far from the border. Dry Fire says Texas ain't that far. My brother's in Maryland. To see him for a wedding. I gotta go to a wedding for my brother here in a few weeks in Virginia. Kevin carries a 357. 2.5 inch. Yeah, and I might be better off with that 2.5 inch barrel, Ken. I like the 4 inch because of the, you know, the performance you get out of the round. But in reality, do I need a 4 inch barrel for carry? No. That 2.5 inch would be great. And Dean is carrying the semi-automatic version of a revolver because 7 rounds of 45 ACP. I don't see the. I got to be honest with you, Dean. Please forgive me. I've never understood the religious fervor with which people hold the 1911. It's a solid pistol. Don't get me wrong. I'm not dissing it, but it seems like there's people who seem to think that the evolution of warfare ended with the 1911. Crystal, Emerson, neither one of you have a tomahawk? for the legal status of the average inner city voter. Charlie. Chief carries a Walther CCP. Oh. 007. Hey, Kaj Odd is here. Like to join. Always associated Torah with Jewish folk. Thought you were Christian. Can you elaborate either way? Yeah, we are Christian. Salvation is through Jesus. We just believe that completely done away with. It gets complicated. I spent an hour talking about it, Kaj. But yeah, salvation is through Jesus. We accept the New Testament and the Gospels and the writings of Paul and the Revelation and all that. We just don't believe the Old Testament was completely done away with the way many Christians do. So we look to the Torah, the Old Testament, for a number of things. We do not believe everyone is called to it. There's two ways to go here. You can go the Torah route, or you can go the Hellenist route. And what I call the Hellenistic route, or the Greeks were called the Hellenes, or so there in the New Testament, there's sort of the Greek Christians and the Jewish Christians. We don't follow the Talmud, and we don't follow Jewish traditions. We only follow the writings of the Old Testament. So that's circumcision. I don't know why it's so awkward to say that. Circumcision. We honor the Sabbath. Saturday. We don't eat kosher. Kosher is a different thing than following the dietary laws in the Bible. Nothing wrong with kosher, it's not what's in the Bible, so we don't follow it. But there's nothing wrong with following kosher. So that's kind of what we were talking about, all the wheres and whys of that. And we always point out, that Jesus was a Jew. There's no way around. You shouldn't even want to get around that. But Jesus was a Jew. Peter was a Jew. Paul was a Jew. Every word of the New Testament was written by a Jew. And so we can't. I think I shouldn't say go that. Like I said, that Hellenistic route. But I think you lose a lot when you remove the Jewish character of the faith. I should say the Hebrew character, the Israelite character. But obviously the Jews were the only representatives of that at the time of Christ. What's Emerson sorry for? Well, we practice. I shouldn't say we. Awkward part again. I mean, we don't do the circumcisions. We have them done medically. But yeah, if you read, and I'm sure you have, I believe it's in Exodus, where when God institutes the Passover, you cannot observe the Passover if you're not circumcised. So if you're going to go that Torah observant route, then yeah, you need to be circumcised. You don't have to be circumcised. You can go the Hellenist route, or a Christian. That's very clearly allowed in there. But if you do want to go the Torah observant route, follow in the footsteps of people, then circumcision becomes a necessity, because you can't observe Passover, and Passover is a covenant for all time. If you're going to go that route, you have to observe Passover, and there's no way to observe Passover without being circumcised. And the New Testament prohibition on circumcision is not a prohibition on circumcision. It's a long passage talking about how neither circumcision or uncircumcision affects your salvation. Salvation's only through Jesus. Circumcision or uncircumcision is part of the obedience you follow after you make that initial commitment. Think of it as getting engaged. It doesn't matter what you have in your hope, what you put in your hope chest if you're not engaged yet. Who did you block, Chief? I didn't see.
That number guy.
Oh. Chief, yeah, you're a moderator for a reason, sir. If you feel like you needed to be blocked, that's fine. Like I said, we allow ideas. We don't allow anger, and we don't allow just stupid vulgarity. Yeah, Keith, I saw that. keep the Indiana school shooting victim in your prayers. His name was Emile Maurice. Who's
personal bodyguard, Hitler, Jew.
Huh. Hitler was Jewish. I have heard that before, Crystal. Ramblin' Mountain Rose carries a 9mm Taurus. Frank remembers his. Thank God I don't. Oh, yeah. Chief Banning. Congratulations, Chief. Yeah, okay. It's been great. Yeah, I think Crystal's right. I think I've read before that Hitler had some Jewish blood in him. Although, now, okay, brain candy. So there's speculation that the Germanic tribes were some of the lost tribes of Israel who migrated up north, and ended up being the modern Germans, the modern English, and the modern French, and all those, and a lot of the Scandinavians too. So it's possible that Hitler was just a straight up Israelite, just many times removed. But like I said, that's brain candy. There's no way to verify that one way or the other. It's just fun. Emerson, your English is pretty good. Yeah, I should point out to everyone that all the Hitler talk may be fun brain candy, but we do have actual Jewish people with us this evening, and we value them greatly. So keep it within the bounds of reason. Out. Good night, Ken. Hitler must have attended the synagogue of Satan. Well, he certainly attended Satan. I thought that was the swastika crystal. I thought was a Hindu, not a Hindu, but there's something closely related to Hinduism. I can't remember who they are. There was something. The swastika has something to do with one of the Indian, the country India. I can't remember who it is though. Who are the guys with the hats?
Sikh?
The Sikh. It may be the Sikhs. I don't think it is the Sikhs though. Nordic polytheism too. All right. Well, like I said, I think this is winding down. We appreciate you. Emerson, we really appreciate you popping in, sir. I especially know how late it is out there, although it's getting to be about that time here. We certainly hope that things calm down out there for you guys. I know the last thing y'all need is any unrest, but it does seem to be the order of the day worldwide, really. So I don't think any of us are going to escape it a whole lot longer. We're still talking about the swastika.
There must be a lot of buffering going on, maybe.
Maybe that's it.
Or not buffering, but delay.
A lot of delay. So, 10:30-ish, music well. What music? Well, why did I think you were way up north somewhere on the East Coast? Maybe I'm thinking of mid-Maine music. Warren, I haven't seen you yet till now, so shalom, thank you. Mountain Rose, shalom, good evening, thank you. Good night, Adam. Good night, Dean. We appreciate you, brother. And let us know when you get a video up. Actually, you know what? Just call me or text me. You got my number. And all right, shalom, Emerson. Oh, about an hour hour south of Nashville off of I-65. Music Well, we might be very close to you in August. We're debating about going to a conference in Nashville in August. If we do that, we will try to just, if you obviously are ooh, David, they speak Portuguese in Brazil.
And look, Crystal's up there too.
Oh, Crystal's yeah, she did say she was in Tennessee. Yeah. Well, maybe we need to try to schedule a Tennessee meet and greet.
Yeah,
I thought it would you have to say. You see in my cheap plastic Walmart cup. I love these things because when I leave them places, it doesn't matter. All right, Dryfire, tell your daughter we said good evening.
What kind of conference?
Oh, sure, we want to go there.
Who all still with us?
Yeah, who's all here? If you've watched a lot of our videos, you may have noticed our Christian polygamy video. Among other things from the Old Testament, we define marriage and sexual mores by the Old Testament. So there's a group we're involved with called Biblical Families. The website is biblicalfamilies.org. We're just members. We're not in the membership or the leadership or anything. But they have periodic conferences where we talk about patriarchy and polygamy is the big thing that gets everybody's attention, and it always gets focused on that when you say it. So you just lead with it. That's not all that it's about, but that is the big focus. So we'll be in a conference for that in Nashville. But there's always downtime between the sessions where we could meet up with folks. So if that interests you at all, when you really read the Old Testament and the biblical laws and stuff, it's shocking at how not boring they are. I mean, this really is a fun, exciting faith. And so, yes, we're not Mormons. We're not straight. We're not racially Jewish or anything. We're Anglo-Saxon Christians who have adopted the Old Testament and feel that dictates certain family structures, patriarchal, almost a dictatorial at the head of the family. With some of God's authority over his family, and that structure also doesn't require, but allows for multiple lives. And whenever we throw that out there, people go, ah! So it's kind of fun. That's the main focus of the group we'll be visiting with in August in Nashville. If we get to go, there's a conflict we've got to resolve. But we really enjoy this group of people and this time together, so we're going to do the best we can to resolve it.
You're saying there's a spider on your shoulder. I don't see it.
It might just be my beard, guys.
I don't know.
I can draw one on you.
Oh, Crystal really likes your smile, Mariah. She's got good taste.
Nobody freaked out about that. That was good.
Thank you, Frank.
They're more interested in the spider.
I can't believe I went through all that and no one's like, oh yeah, okay, whatever.
I wonder if I can make this happen.
There's something about Charlie's going to be like David Hogg, though.
Yeah,
I'm not
David
sure if
Hogg
that's-
wasn't at the school.
I know, but is he talking about what you were just talking about?
I don't know.
Sorry.
Just whatever you do, Charlie, don't do that thing where you put your noodle up in the air and turn it sideways and make the, show that your elbow the thickest. Head Adam. Yeah, that's where Cy Robinson's teacup went. Where's the spider?
I don't.
Made you look. Oh, ha ha, funny, Chief. Good night. Alvin 82. Good to see you. Yeah, that's one of our daughters back there, Crystal. We have 6 sons and 7 daughters total, and we don't feature the middle girls in the videos quite as much. They haven't been comfortable with it, but this particular daughter is a beautiful, infectious smile.
They're talking about you.
Hey, North Country, I did not know you were still with us, sir. Thank you for hanging out so long. Good night. And like I told everyone, neat channel. Go check it out. They got it going on up there. Yeah, she's pretty cute, Crystal. And Dean, I'm sorry. David Hogg looks like he could use a gun. I'm not Charlie. I think that may be why he's anti-gun. They're just too heavy for him. corner of couch looks like a spider sitting there.
Spider plant, maybe?
There's some plants back there.
Oh,
I don't know. They're making us look again. Texas meet and greet. That's actually not too far out of the realm of possibility. Dry fire.
I want to visit Texas.
Yeah,
I've never been.
my family, my dad's family is from Texas. My dad grew up in Chicago, but his father was from Texas, and that whole side was from Texas all the way back until like right after the Civil War, like 1860s. I think the Comanches were still rampaging through when they moved out there and started a sheep ranch way out in West Texas, a little place called Sanko. Or Robert E. Lee is near there, and or Robert Lee, or I think it's Robert Sanko, Robert E. Lee. There's something green. It's in Coke County. Yeah, she is shy, Crystal. Well, actually, that's a lie. She's not shy. She pretends to be shy until she breaks out into a Broadway musical at the top of her voice and dances around the living room. And Charlie's still on hog. There you go, Burden. Okay, I can't stop. El Camino. Isn't that like horse? El Camino salga a tu encuentro. Get a shotgun now. Yeah, well, what you're not seeing, she's actually the youngest of my 3 stepdaughters, and they're all 3 drop-dead gorgeous. So yeah, the oldest of those 3 girls is probably out with her boyfriend right now. Did she come home?
She came and she brought the truck back, and then she went back out.
At 11:30? Do we know where is she spending the night with somebody? Okay. I'm a bad daddy. I let her out without knowing what was going on. My oldest daughter is actually married, and she's coming home this weekend for a visit, and I am so hoping that she's going to have a big round belly when she walks in here, because I want to be a grandfather so bad I can taste it. So she married a Marine, and if he hasn't given me a grandchild this weekend, I'm going to sit down and talk to him about the state of the United States Marine Corps. They are obviously relaxing the standards a little too low. They've been married like 9 months. She shouldn't even be pregnant. I should have an actual physical crying grandchild when they come through the door. Don't get me started. Yeah, she's going to break hearts, Crystal. She also likes to punch them too, though, I think. Get a Yugoslavian SKS and get a backdoor deal for some Yugo grenades. Dadgummit, Charlie, what is this obsession you have with Soviet weaponry? Well, Yugoslavian isn't Soviet, but the Yugos actually were decent manufacturers. SKS is better than an AK-47 in my opinion, but it's still this giant lunky thing that. Do the Yugoslavians have the detachable magazines? I don't remember if they're detachable or not. Just bite the bullet, buddy, and admit you live in America, and get yourself an AR-15. Old core is long gone, Zach. Sorry. I know, David. I don't know what to say. Here I give this young man a beautiful girl. She's a gorgeous girl. Tall, blonde, dancer. Really pretty girl. He's got her for 9 months. I still don't have a grandchild. There is something wrong with this country. You collect the NVA Soviet surplus, huh? Is that North Vietnam? That's the North Vietnam Army. We have some guys here who actually have seen that surplus in action back when it wasn't surplus yet. Crystal's gonna learn to fight backwoods mean. You are from Tennessee, aren't you, Crystal? Oh, NVA is East German. I don't know why I was thinking it was North Vietnamese. Yeah, David saw her. Actually, we have a little clip up of me dancing with her at the wedding. He seems like a nice guy, David. I don't know. I didn't get to meet him that well. I'm not on the best of terms with that girl, so I was frozen out of a lot of the preparation. Actually, the first time I met him was at the wedding. So, but he seems like a decent kid, young man. He's a young man. We will try to set it up, dry fire. I don't know when that might be, but that would be fun. Uh, we need to upgrade our van before we go making that trip, though. Or make friends with an Apache. Me, I married one. That would do it. That would do it. That's where you get the Bowie knife comes in, right? Okay, I keep trying to let everyone go, and people keep being interesting and sucking me back in. Where did you find an Apache at, Crystal? It does. I think it's going to get better as she gets older, though, David. Maybe not. I could be wrong, but I just feel like there's been a thawing anyway, and I think it will continue to thaw as she's married longer, and maybe his children start coming along, and maybe I don't seem like such a bizarre animal to her anymore. Of my three, I've got the 3 stepdaughters, and I have 3 biological daughters. And of the 3, there's 2 that I don't quite see eye to eye with, and then there's a third who is very sweet to me, and then there's the 3 stepdaughters who are like daughters and are always sweet to me. The VZ52 is an SKS with detachable mags. Chickasaw, Cherokee, and Comanche mix here, cousin. Okay, I'm really doing it this time. The problem is finding one in... What were they chambered in, Charlie? Were they 7.62 by 54 Russian? I can't imagine they were the Tokarev. And white. Can't forget the white part. That's all right, you round-eyed devil. They'll forgive you. 7.62 by 45. Huh. Well, you sprung one on me, Charlie. I am not familiar with that. I don't believe I've ever heard David admit to being white before. Thoughts on the Nephilim giants? Oh, the first thing I think about that, Witcher, is that what a fun religion we have. The first thing I think about the Nephilim giants is, these are the descendants of when the sons of God, which I assume to be the angels, slept with the daughters of men and produced these heroes of old. And the first thing I think about that makes me really, really happy is that in the New Testament, Jesus says that there won't be giving and taking of marriage in heaven. There will be as the angels. And many people take that to mean that we won't be having sex in heaven, which really bothers a lot of us, me particularly. And I look back at the Old Testament and I see where the sons of God, ostensibly the angels, were having sex with the daughters of men, and I think, who knows, it might not be that bad. We'll find out. That's my first thought. We may still get to have sex in heaven. It's obviously very late. My second thought is that this of course hints at mysteries. There's a few other things like this in the Old Testament. Melchizedek is another one who just gives me fits. He wraps me around the axle. I don't have no framework to put that guy into. But there's just some mysteries. There's things that are hinted at that just aren't revealed to us, and it's exciting to think about and a lot of fun. Think about Enoch. Enoch was no more. He never died. God took him up to heaven. He never died. Some of the other ones that are, well, those are the ones off the top of my head. But we have some mysteries that God doesn't fill us in on everything. He just lets us know there's some exciting stuff out there that we're not privy to. That's my first thought on the Nephilim. So there you go. Do with that what you will. They don't disprove anything to me. Remember, I believe in a God who can say, let there be light, and an entire universe instantly comes into being. So obviously, giant Nephilim are nothing for this guy. There's nothing in that. Once you accept that there's a God who, a creator God, there's nothing in that book that isn't outside the bounds of possibility. It's all possible once you accept as a supernatural creator. So I accept the Nephilim for what they tell me. about it, which is very little, and then I enjoy speculating about the rest of it. Well, that's a good quote from Will Rogers. I have just enough white blood for you to question my honesty. The Anunnaki Gnostic mysticism, pretty similar to the idea of the Nephilim. Anunnaki. My wife is ecstatic about possibly meeting your wife. Well, that's cool, Dryfire. Thank you. I think aliens are fallen angels. Fallen angels. Yeah, fallen angels is what's happened when I put a roof on. All my angles just fall. Husband is Apache and Blackfoot. I'm Cherokee and some Sioux friends. And some Sioux friends name me. Oh, and I'm Cherokee and some Sioux friends name me as family. I see. So you have beautiful children with long black hair. Or you have red hair, so maybe not. Maybe not. Okay. Should I try one more time to shut this thing down, or is someone else going to be interesting?
Just do it.
Dryfire, if you want to shoot me that and in an email, I'll see if I can. Wife and Mariah. I'm looking at your picture, Crystal. It's not brown.
Her hair is brown.
It's not. Look at it.
Well, it's obviously not natural.
Okay. All right, folks. We appreciate you. We've enjoyed you to no end. And I don't know when we'll do these again, one of these again, but we will do one again in the near future. And like I said, thank you for your patience and being with us. Fallen angels is what happens when the overpass that was built by an all-woman team collapsed hours after it was built. Or what happens to the Anaheim baseball team every July. Well, to go with the Cherokee, she's Irish, German, and Scottish. So you like to fight is what you're telling us, Crystal. Australian. So you like to fight and drink really bad beer. Okay, I'm done. Yeah, but they started being interesting again. Hair dye, vampire red. Okay, we're done. We appreciate you folks. Good evening. I'm just going to turn this off, and I'm not going to wait for anybody because if I... we'll talk to you soon, guys.
You gonna turn it off?
I don't know how to turn it off.